these people. And just take a moment to rest your attention with your breath, just as it is. Maybe take a breath and notice the contact between your body and your feet, between your feet and the ground. And let yourself really feel into that rootedness in the earth, that connection, that support that we have. And take a moment to acknowledge this land that supports us, this land that we're sitting on right now. And also to acknowledge those who've cared for the land and their ancestors, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Mississauga of the Credit River. And as we do that, let us remember that one of the laws of this land is the dish with one spoon covenant. And that law tells us that we each take what we need from the land and we leave enough for the others. Humans and more than human. So let us remember that law and remember also those with whom we share the land, human and non-human, those in this room, those in the city, and all around the world. May we be nourished by each other's wisdom. And let us dedicate our work together this evening, not only to those ancestors who have brought us here and all of those alive in earth right now, but also to the beings of the future, human and non-human, that they may thrive for many generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Well, I think that de-stresses us from the day very nicely. Puts us in a problem-solving frame of mind. And can I just ask for a show of hands at the back? Can you hear me adequately back there? I don't want to turn up the mic too loud if we don't have to. Okay, so before we get started, I'd simply invite our panelists this evening to stand up and turn around so that you can be acknowledged by the audience. As you can see, we have a fairly large panel this evening, and I won't tell you all their names right now, but that is forthcoming, I assure you. Thank you guys. I think that this issue that we're looking at tonight, buildings and cities, truly exemplifies that it takes a village to tackle this issue, and that's part of the reason why we have so many panelists this evening. So we are going to need to move things along fairly expeditiously, because we also do have a lot of content to cover this evening, and we also want to have time for questions and answers from you guys, and answers from the panelists. So let me just take a few moments and set the stage. So first of all, as the slide tells you, my name is Paul Dowsett. I'm the principal architect at Sustainable TO, and we are a firm that specializes in building things, designing things to have them built by others that are as energy efficient as possible. And how that connects to this is that by being energy efficient, we're also looking at the type of energy that we use, and we want to use the cleanest energy possible so that we are putting as little carbon into the atmosphere as we possibly can. And ideally, we'll get to a point where buildings are actually helping to bring carbon out of the atmosphere. Buildings and cities will be helping to bring carbon out of the atmosphere. And that is what our panelists will be presenting this evening, is a number of ways that we can, A, reduce the amount of energy that buildings and cities need to consume, and ways that then buildings and cities can help to draw down carbon from the atmosphere. So we just have a couple of paragraphs here that I'd like to read, describing sort of what Drawdown is. Project Drawdown was founded by author and environmentalist Paul Hawken. It's a scientifically based, comprehensive plan to implement the top 100 solutions to reverse global warming by 2050. Reversing climate change is not only possible, but feasible and eminently practical. The New York Times best-selling book sets out the solutions, the math, and the economies of how we can actually do this in an inspirational and accessible way. To that point, Drawdown books are on sale at the table at the front. Please see David Berman, Paul Overy, Natalie Zen, or Julie Saunders. They're all at the table at the front. You've met them already. This particular Drawdown Toronto series is organized by a group called Unify Toronto. And Unify Toronto is a group of like-minded individuals who have set up this 13-month program. And it was started in about April of this year, so we're not quite halfway through at this point. And this 13-month program aims to generate enough activity to make Toronto a hub of drawdown activity in North America. It includes a series of introductions to drawdown, 7 sector summits, of which this is one, and a 4-session course that will put vital information about how we can reverse global warming into your hands. It will connect you with other change makers, and it will galvanize your action with a new sense of optimism and agency. So the question about why is buildings and cities a topic? Why is this a topic of Project Drawdown? Dense urban human settlement, the cities of the world and the buildings that comprise those cities, account for a significant percentage of human energy use, mostly for heating and cooling. This makes them a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions. Rapid urbanization in the past century has led to an inefficient design of cities, buildings, and infrastructure. For buildings and cities, Project Drawdown identifies 15 solutions that are identified in their order of impact. And they are district heating, insulation, LED lighting, heat pumps. The first LED lighting was for households, the second LED lighting is for commercial buildings, building automation, walkable cities, smart thermostats, landfill methane, bike infrastructure. You can see that this is a very, very broad topic. Bike infrastructure, smart glass, water distribution, green roofs, net zero building, and retrofit. And it's interesting that net zero buildings and retrofit, the business that I'm in, are the last 2 on the list, meaning that according to this list of 15 topics, they are the least impactful. Well, that bothered somebody like me, because that's the business I'm in. So we dug a little deeper to find out why those were listed last. They're not actually listed last because they're the least impactful. They're listed last because their impact is actually incalculable. I think that's the actual word. Their impact is incalculable, as in the efforts are so disparate that the magnitude of error in the calculation just makes the calculations kind of meaningless. So I think it's worth recognizing that building retrofits and achieving net zero buildings is one of the most important things that we can do with both buildings and cities. So we'll ignore the fact that they're listed last, because they're listed last for a reason. Okay, another couple of interesting factoids. Project Drawdown estimates that $4.8 trillion US, which is about 5 years of US military spending, would be the total cost to implement all 15 of those strategies today. So if we could set aside 5 years of US military spending, we could pay to do all of those things globally. The other interesting thing is that would reduce about 55 gigatons of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere, however big a gigaton is. I think it's a very big thing. But the more important, or not the more important thing, but the more interesting thing that we kind of grasp is that the lifetime savings, based on that investment of $4.8 trillion, the lifetime savings would be $17.9 trillion. Almost almost 4 times the money that we put in. So on a return of investment calculation, that's a 300% return on investment. I pretty much think any financial advisor would tell you, take that deal. That's a good investment to make. So, with all that in mind, tonight's topic is about the growth of regenerative cities and sustainable buildings. Thinking has come full circle on cities, from blaming them for environmental destruction to considering that urban environments, properly designed and managed, can be a kind of biological as well as a cultural arc. Or places where human beings can have the lowest impact on the planet and be educated, creative, and healthy. Buildings and broader urban habitats have become a font of innovation with respect to water, energy, lighting, design, and impact. Work is now being done by myself and a whole bunch of people sitting in this front row. Work is now being done to determine how cities could be more productive in terms of air, water, flora, fauna, pollinators, and carbon sequestration. That's a hard word to say. Sequestration. Than the original lands that they were built upon. So there are actually methods and thinking to make our human-built environments better for us than the land that nature delivered. And I know that's a bit of a mind shift, but that's where we need to get to. So rather than being a source or cause of degradation, as buildings are becoming more sustainable, cities are becoming more regenerative to the environment and to human well-being. So that's our topic for this evening. So just before we get rolling with the panels, I just want to say that out of respect for everybody's time this evening, and because we do need to be gone from here at 9:30, we are going to limit the individual presentations by the panelists to 10 minutes, and there will be a 1 minute and a 15-second reminder to be announced through a bell. So we're not going to hold up cards or anything, there's going to be a bell. And did we have a bell that was going to sound? It's subtle, but it's there. Awesome. So we're going to get rolling. So our first pair of presenters are Lloyd Alter and Jenny McMinn. And first up is Lloyd Alter. Give you a little bio on Lloyd, and then when Lloyd is finished, we bring up Jenny. We'll give you a little bio on Jenny as well. So Lloyd Alter is a writer and design editor of treehugger.com. He has graduated from the University of Toronto School of Architecture, now Daniels School of Architecture, and he has practiced as an architect, real estate developer, and prefab housing entrepreneur. He has contributed to The Guardian, Azure, Huffington Post, and Corporate Knights magazines. Lloyd is also an adjunct professor teaching sustainable design at Ryerson University School of Interior Design. Lloyd is a past president of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario. So please give it up for Lloyd Alter.
Okay, does this work? 10 minutes isn't much, and I'm the first. I could spend 10 minutes arguing about those 15 points. I think you can get it down to 5, and I'm going to talk about my 5 points. Next, please. We know that there's a crisis that we're going through. We felt it all this summer with the heat, and with the water, and the endless flooding. And a lot of people are saying, well, the real problem is transportation, and look, it's the worst. Power generation is actually less carbon, things are getting better with that, and buildings are way down there. Well, this graph is deceptive to the point of being wrong. Next. What you really have to look at, because power feeds buildings and feeds everything, is what's making the carbon. And what you've got is about a quarter is coming from transportation, which is how we get between buildings and between our houses and our stores and everything. A quarter of it is from our buildings, which is what we're driving to. And a quarter of it is industry, which is basically making the cars that are going to making the buildings. It's all a factor of urban design. It all fits together. We travel by car because that's the way our cities are designed. So you have to look at the whole picture as one thing. Next. Now, a lot of people think that this is the future we want, that we're all going to live in beautiful suburban houses with solar shingles in our roofs and 2 Teslas in our garage and a Powerball on the wall. And we're going to drive these beautiful electric cars, And eventually they'll all be autonomous and they'll take us wherever we want to go. Or we'll all be flying through hyperloops and tubes underground. And we'll be living in these beautiful garden suburbs that we get to with our autonomous cars and have our food deliveries by drone. Well, no. There are fantasies that are down the road. There are fantasies that people are planning on the waterfront right now. There are all kinds of fantasies. But what you've got to do is look at what we can do that's real and is immediate. Now, one thing we can immediately do is start radically decarbonizing the way we make our building by using regenerative materials, materials that grow, like wood. Now, this is the problem with concrete and other buildings like that is that when you make them, they give out a lot of carbon. There's this big carbon burp for every time you build that new building that takes years for you to get over. So if you build with natural materials, and this is my favorite building, the Enterprise Centre in the UK by Archetype, it's made completely with natural materials. You could probably shred the thatched walls and the wood floors and eat this building for breakfast, and you wouldn't burn it. It's all wood, as I said. Other people are replacing concrete with things like cross-laminated timber. This is a building, the world's largest CLT building in Britain right now. And it's built on top of a brand new subway line they're building, and CLT is much lighter than concrete, so they're able to build this with less concrete in the foundations as well. In Canada, we're developing new technologies like this one, which is cheaper and easier to use than CLT, which is dowel laminated timber. Just a bunch of dumb boards with a hole drilled through it and a dowel stuck through to hold it all together. And they're building huge buildings with this kind of technology, like this T3 warehouse by Michael Green architect that's in Indianapolis. In Scandinavia, they're using technologies with less wood. They're building what we would call almost conventional wood frame, but they're doing it with robots and getting incredible accuracy, incredible insulation and soundproofing. So they're able to build multifamily housing out of wood that's as good or better than anything that we've seen built out of the traditional materials we use here. And it's lovely housing. The next thing we have to do is, this is the most important, I think, is reduce demand, radically reduce demand. And we do that, I think my favorite way is that great Canadian invention, the Passive House. If you've heard of Passive House, the first real version of Passive House was done in Saskatchewan in the mid-70s. And this is how it worked, a big envelope of insulation around your house with a heat recovery ventilator and careful placements of windows. And some Germans came and saw the concept there and in other places and developed the Passive House concept, which is basically the same drawing. And it shouldn't be called a Passive House because house is building, and it's actually for all kinds of buildings. This is a new rental building in Vancouver that is built to Passive House standards. It's a bit busy on the exterior, I'll get into that. The next thing, and this one is new to me, it's the latest addition for me, which is electrify everything. I have a gas stove at home. It seemed to me logical that if I want to make tea and boil water, why would I boil water down at a power station using fossil fuels or whatever, and then have that turn a turbine and turn a generator, pump electrons down a wire to my house to go to an element to make heat to boil water. That seemed dumb. Do it directly. But I was wrong, and I was wrong because the electrical grid is constantly decarbonizing. Right now, we are out of coal in Ontario, and we've got a little bit of natural gas. It could be gone too. With my gas stove, I'm burning gas. Well, right now, after this, I signed up for Bullfrog and I'm burning poop gas, but we're still burning gas. Next. So, and technology has changed dramatically now. Induction ranges are better than gas ranges. Hot water tanks, you can heat the water when electricity is cheap, or where you've got solar and you can store it for later. Dryers, which used to be like a hole in the wall, now are heat pump dryers that you can recirculate it off. And if your house is super insulated and you've got that Passive House standard, then a dumb electric baseboard is really all you need to heat the thing, because you need so little energy in the first place. The next thing is something that we've got to learn in Toronto is about, dumb boxes, that everything doesn't have to be so fancy. When you go, I was just in Vancouver, and I saw this new building by the Arcade Ringgels, who everybody loves. And this building is supposedly energy efficient with vacuum glass. And you look at it, you see what kind of person would design this. Just maximize surface area, maximize flashing problems, maximize cost. This building is exactly what we should not be doing next. You can just see it's going to be a nightmare for everyone who lives there, and the guy who built it, and the guy who has to pay the maintenance fees. If you go to Germany, if you go to Austria, you see they're building a lot of dumb boxes. They're simple, low buildings. They're doing them all over town. Nothing about this piling the high rises in one place and having single family houses somewhere else. This is the standard everywhere. And they're simple. The architects have learned that you adjust with proportion and design so that you don't have to do crazy things. I always point to Montreal and the Plateau District as a model of how we should be building. It's simple, they're not beautiful, but it is the densest housing in all of North America because it's 100% efficient with those stairways on the outside, and everybody loves to live there because when you hit a certain density, you can support restaurants and bars and everything else that makes life fun. In Toronto, we haven't got that yet. When the building codes change to say you can't be all glass yet, all these architects figure, oh, we got to change colors of panels and stick on all doodads and stuff like that to jazz up the building because they haven't figured out yet how to do dumb boxes, or as we call them, a hashtag BBB, boxy but beautiful. It's something that comes with practice. Finally, my last one is, I think, also really important, which I call radical sufficiency. What is the appropriate technology? What do you need? So a lot of people say, well, we've got to sell fossil fuel. We'll all drive our new Teslas and that'll solve the problem. But it doesn't solve the problem. You still need all the concrete for the highways to get everywhere. You still have congestion and all of the problems that come from that. You still have people getting squished by cars. It doesn't solve the problem. What's appropriate if you don't have long distance to go, which 3/4 of our trips are not long, is technology that's appropriate. Here in Scandinavia, they have trams if you don't want to take your bicycle, and they have bicycles. Bicycles keep you healthy. Bicycles get you to school. Bicycles get you to work. And in Toronto, what do you get? If there's a bike lane, there's a continent, or there's a village track. They don't even think about the fact, yes, we're going to make life good for bicycles. It's all urban design, about deciding if this is the appropriate technology, this is what you do. 2 more slides. No. And new technology is coming, like scooters and e-bikes that are going to change even more. So I keep going back to Vienna, to a whole city of low buildings like this, about bicycles and subways as the ways to get around. And my 5 rules, forget their 15, are decarbonize construction by going to renewable materials, reduce demand by insulating the hell out of everything, electrify everything so that we can eventually totally get off carbon, use appropriate technology, what you need for the job that's being done, and keep it dumb. I keep hearing so much about smart cities. Give me a dumb city that works.
One of my favorite Lloyd Alder quotes that I like to trot out in presentations is always, relative to smart thermostats. Lloyd says, in a well-designed building, a smart thermostat would be bored stupid. It's one of my favorites. So thanks for that, Lloyd. Okay, so amazing what we can get accomplished in 10 minutes. So no pressure, Jim. So, next up is Jenny McMinn. As Managing Director of Urban Equation, Jenny provides real estate development and sustainability advisory across North America. Jenny's most recent clients include Sidewalk Toronto, Oxford Properties, and Dream, as well as all levels of Canadian government. Jenny is actively advising on over 20 million square feet of carbon-neutral community development. 20 million, that's a big number. Prior to joining Urban Equation, for nearly a decade at Hulsall Associates, now WSP, Jenny led design teams, municipalities, and building owners in the creation of award-winning, high-performance green building and community design projects. With her experience in sustainable architecture, performance management, and business modeling, Jenny has led teams with multidisciplinary stakeholders and consultants on a range of cutting-edge green projects, including those targeting One Planet Living, Living Building Challenge, the WELL Standard, and LEED Platinum. Out of the office, Jenny can often be found in the yoga studio, learning and leading. Jenny's topic is inspiring change through impact, creating better places to live. Next up, Jenny Min.
Well, first I was excited not to have to go first, but it's a tough second spot to fill. Boy, thanks for that. So I think I was excited to be invited to come tonight, and thanks to all of you for coming out and using your personal time to learn more about how we can improve the planet and improve all of our qualities of life. I think the Project Drawdown certainly aligns very well with what we do every day in our consulting practice, in that we are trying to help enable developers and city builders in making change, both for reducing planetary impact, but also inspiring a better way of living. So a lot of the work that we do rolls together many of the individual suggestions and great ideas that Lloyd was just talking about, and tries to think about how can communities or larger scale development projects pick and choose the pieces or the kit of parts that's going to have the biggest impact. Because as individual developers, it's hard to wrap your arms around all of them. And I think what can often happen, as Lloyd pointed out, is sometimes you throw the whole, all of those things in one facade, and it can be too much, and it can often be cost prohibitive. So how do we do that? So I run a consulting practice, a sustainability consulting practice, and I think what's unique about what we're bringing to the market is we are trying to help really broaden the value proposition. So real estate developers are often driven by financials. Yes, they are trying to build great buildings that we can all live in and communities, but it's their risk on the line often. And so what we're trying to bring to the discussion is not only why should we do it, obviously all of you are here today because you believe that there's a need to change how we're building, but we need to convince people through all of the tools that we have, financials being a critical element of that. So we're spending our time bringing both the kind of technical prowess, the social change, social purpose value proposition, as well as the financial next. So Lloyd talked a lot about, again, the bits, the technical components, the very specific solutions. They've been around for a long time. Why are we not implementing them? The new technology is not necessarily needed to take us where we need to go. What's needed is the motivation to actually make change. Why aren't people doing it? In our opinion, the narrative around sustainability or drawing down needs to change. It's not overly inspiring for people, either residents or builders, to think about doing less. I think that what we're trying to bring to the discussion and the dialogue is, can you actually create a much better place to live? A more inspiring place where you're cycling yourself and your children to work, and you're actually improving your own health and the quality of life that you have. And so we're doing that typically at community scales, either for new developments or redevelopments. And we're doing so with a system that we think does a good balancing act between the technical bits, but also the more motivational pieces that taps into both minds and hearts through social activation, quality, and cohesion amongst community elements. So one of the systems that we use is a system called One Planet Living. There's a bunch of things that we like about it. It's not the only system that we use, but one of the key things that I like about it, it's pretty easy to understand. The concept is we should be building our cities and our buildings within the resources that our one planet can actually afford us. The challenge is that we're currently in North America using about 3.5 planets worth of resources. So how do we get there? What we like about the One Planet Living system is empirically, or from a mind perspective and an analytical perspective, people get that we have one planet and there are only so many trees that we can use to build things, as an example. The math behind it's quite a bit more complicated, and certainly Project Drawdown does quite a lot of that related math. But we like it as an opening principle, particularly engaging broad community groups because people get it. Within the system itself are 10 principles, and the 10 principles speak to reducing your impact on the planet through environmental measures like reducing carbon, reducing the amount of water that's being consumed, thinking responsibly about material selection, as Lloyd pointed out in many of the different slides and suggestions that he had. But the other really interesting part is it also is tapping into people's hearts. It's putting priority on things like health and happiness, culture and community, equity and economy, and really motivating a full spectrum of what's needed to motivate, but also deliver and measure the impacts that we're all wanting to see. So I've spoken about a number of these. On the planetary impact side, I think these overlap and are very similar to some of the concepts in Planet Drawdown and many other certification systems. The inspiring change piece is the one that I find really kind of unique and exciting. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've applied the different principles and the system or the thinking as a whole on a number of community development projects. So ZB is a project in Ottawa. It's about 50 acres. It's super complicated, to be perfectly honest. It straddles a river. Half of it is in Quebec, half of it is in Ontario, 2 provinces, 2 municipalities, the feds, you name it, everybody's interested in this site. It's an old industrial land, full of the complexities that I mentioned, and just getting the project going was a challenge. What was exciting and inspiring for all of the different stakeholders who needed to come to the table was the concept of can we redevelop this otherwise decrepit industrial site and actually inhabit it, infuse life into it, and do it within the resources of one planet. So the concept itself got lots of players to the table, kind of took down the silos that traditionally exist with regulators and other stakeholders that often come to the table, and provided a common ground that got people excited. The project is targeting all, has been endorsed by One Planet Living. It will be a carbon neutral community. It has a community energy system on site that does a number of things. There's a thermal energy system as well as leveraging the cleaner electricity in Quebec currently to drive the district energy system. Next. Chinese Pasture, another project in Ottawa. This is a federally owned site. Again, lots of different stakeholders here. So how do you get a group of very disparate interests motivated around creating a place that's actually exciting and delivering the planetary impact that we want? This one's pretty early on in its conception. But again, one of the inspiring bits to it was the concept of getting people talking around the concept of sustainability and opening up and kind of coming out of their municipal silos, sorry if there are any public servants in the room, and just talking about what everybody wants to see in a new community, not just how we get there or what the problems are. Port Credit West Village is a site, a 72-acre site on the waterfront in Mississauga. A group of private developers came together and are redeveloping the brownfield site, what used to be the Imperial Oil lands. So you have a number of private developers here who want to build a quality product, but of course are very bottom line driven. So we used the concept of One Planet Living and we prioritized some very specific moves on the site to hit the planetary piece, but also to help get the residents around the site excited because rightfully they were concerned about having too many neighbors and the traffic on the lakeshore getting increased and increasing their commute time. So some of the big moves that fit into both the planetary and the inspiring piece was really thinking creatively about how to get people from the GO station. One of the biggest challenges in switching to a sustainable transportation strategy is that last mile. How do you get people from, say, the GO station to their beautiful condo on the waterfront? If it takes more than 2 to 5 minutes to get there, most people are looking for some other way to get there, and it might be a car. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So all kinds of strategies around walkable streets, around water-related amenities, and getting people excited about getting to and from the site, both the people who are wanting to live there, but also to get the surrounding residents excited that this is actually a cool place and it's going to help improve the overall quality of the neighborhood. Next. Sidewalk Labs. So another place, another opportunity where we've been engaged and we're working with a couple of other local energy experts, EQ Building Performance and Energy Profiles, where there are big aspirations on that site, and I arguably may be controversial from Lloyd's comments earlier. One of the key pieces that we're bringing to that is we do think it's inspiring to stretch and to think about what can really be done, not to be too siloed or too restrictive, but to really stretch and see how far can we go. Our role on this project with the other consultants was to look at what are buildings already doing? How much are they actually consuming? It might sound like people do that a lot, but that's rarely the case. We don't have a lot of access to data. So we used a large anonymized data set to help provide a ton of data to figure out how do you really get to a climate positive community. So that work's underway. If I have 2 slides. Algonquin College is a project that we've been working on for 10 years, and this is one that evolved from a place of really prescriptive sustainability measures where they knew they kind of wanted to reduce energy and also interested in water. And over the last 10 years has transitioned into inspiring students, staff, visitors through curriculum change, through continually updating their planetary targets like water and energy, and weaving in ongoing education and engagement. One of the cool things that they do regularly as well is they actually go back and measure. It seems like an obvious thing to do, but we often try new technologies and things and we don't actually know if they work. So we're pretty excited to continue our work there. And I think that might be it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jenny. It's great to see that Jenny's office is working directly with developers. We have Mary Pickering. Mary is the VP of Programs and Partnerships at the Atmospheric Fund. The Atmospheric Fund is a non-profit corporation that has been advancing low-carbon solutions for cities for 25 years. Originally endowed by the City of Toronto and now also endowed by the Province of Ontario, TAF invests in a manner that achieves financial and environmental impact and uses the returns to provide grants and to undertake projects that demonstrate, de-risk, and help mainstream technologies, policies, and practices that reduce urban greenhouse gas emissions. Mary has more than 25 years of management experience in the environmental nonprofit sector and is an accredited member of the International Partnership Brokers Association. Mary oversees the design and development of TAF programs focusing on social innovation, policy advocacy, and multi-stakeholder collaborations. Mary also supervises the granting program, communications, and the organization's key performance indicators. Mary's topic this evening is Urban Climate Action for Positive Change. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, you got my whole job description there. Thanks, great to be here and thinking about these issues together with all of you. I think what I'm absorbing from the presentations so far is, the complexity to these issues. We can talk about them in segments, but they're really much more nuanced and integrated, and I think it does take a lot of shifting in our thinking to solve these problems, a lot of creativity. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my organization, what we have to offer, what our role is, and what our role is in particular around buildings in the sector. So this is where we work. We work across the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area supporting emissions reductions in cities. Slide. As was mentioned, we've been around since '91, and we were the world's first municipal climate agency when people didn't think about working on climate issues at the local level. Now, of course, there's a realization that's extremely important. So we have a few tools that we use in order to help community members like yourself and others in municipalities themselves, to explore new ideas. So our role is as an incubator agency. We don't deliver programs, we help people explore opportunities to reduce carbon. Through grants, through grants and impact investing, our endowment fund is invested in mandate-related activity. We use the interest to fund our work, and we try to bring together, it's very important to us to look at problems from multiple perspectives, so we have a strong convening role, policy as an important tool. And we do some pilot testing, not just in the technological area, but also in areas that relate to cultural change, to policy development, and in particular to finance innovation. Just wanted to tell you a few things. I mean, we have a long history, so we've had relationships with lots of different initiatives in the city, helping them to get up off the ground. Our role has always been in a very early stage in identifying and helping to try out new approaches to carbon reduction. You can see here, we were one of the first investors in AutoShare, the first auto-sharing company in Ontario, SolarShare, which has now developed millions and millions of dollars of photovoltaic projects funded by community members, smart commute, for employers to bring people rethink their transportation issues. Also some technology pilots, as you can see here. Most currently we work with urban heat pump applications. But we also look at policies in building areas, in particular critical policies that we explore in other jurisdictions in North America, and try to bring and seed ideas for new policies. For example, we were the first to bring the idea for energy, water reporting, and benchmarking policy from the States to Canada to generate a policy that's now being applied to generate all this data about buildings that we heard in our last presentation. It's so hard, so critical, so hard to come by. Finally, I'll just mention that we also work with the City of Toronto to co-develop its climate plan, which came into effect about a year ago. And the key element of this plan, I will say, is that it's about, it sort of embodies the premise that we should not be designing climate actions that do not drive multiple valuable community benefits. Because if we do, we're going to have policies that are not durable over time, and we're going to miss an opportunity to do an awful lot of good things for cities. I like in the Drawdown plan how it says that many of the actions it looks at, not only are they, as we found with the Transform TO modeling plan, they can be achieved with existing technology and approaches, but they are, what's the term they use, no regret policies, because they drive a lot of valuable benefits besides climate action. I think this is a very important issue I'd like to explore a little bit more. Next slide. Okay, I think a lot of us know this. Where do they come from, the emissions? This is actually a bit of a new spin. This is a regional inventory for Greater Toronto Hamilton area. It's the first time we've done that. Take a look as a region, and we think it's very important for us to think not as just a city, but as a region, because the issues that we're dealing with are, defy municipal boundaries. Of course, buildings comes out on top every time, all across the region. The buildings are where the emissions are coming from. Industrial transportation also very important, of course, and in GTHA, agriculture is not something that's generating a lot of emissions for us. At my agency, recognizing the importance of buildings in contributing to our local emissions, we spent 5 or 6 years really filling a gap through a self-managed program at our own agency to undertake super retrofits. I'll just remind you that new buildings are critical, and the policy for that is critical. But most of the building emissions we're dealing with now and for the next 50 years come from buildings that are already built. So retrofitting is a very, despite the sequencing, retrofitting is going to be an important activity, we feel, for some time to come. It's extremely challenging, more difficult in many ways than building it right from the beginning, to have to go back in and fix it afterwards. We work mostly in social housing. Again, we focus there because there's some multiple benefits to be had by improving social housing through retrofits, including environmental quality of the buildings inside and general repair. We also just measure these things to an inch of their life and make sure that we understand after the technologies are applied that we are drawing out lessons to share with the community about what is really working. and what isn't. And we take all those actions in Drawdown, the lights, the technologies, the heat pumps, and they're in an integrated design, and we consider their impacts as a package, which is also something that I think is an important insight we gained from doing this work. I wanted to talk a little bit tonight. I was asked to just explain a little bit how TAF can provide support to people in the community who are leading innovative ideas. And of course, we can provide grants to any nonprofit entity, anyone who's not a private individual or company. So it could be institutions, it could be people who work in cities, nonprofit organizations, community organizations, business associations, professional associations, etc. We work with a wide, and like to work with a wide variety of players to stimulate and support their ideas, especially at the early phases when they're figuring out whether or not something might work. We're risk tolerant, that's our job. We're looking, if the project doesn't work, fantastic, we learn something. So we're looking for projects that have great potential but may not be proven as yet. With the change in political priorities, of course, we've lost a lot of potential funding in this area. It's a challenge. But, there are some other sources which I can tell you more about here on our website. We can direct you to the remaining programs. We have some money. We're not replacing. There's no way my agency is going to replace the money we've lost through recent provincial programs. But this is what I wanted to tell you or share with you about this. This co-benefits analysis is really important for political durability, but also to make our projects relevant to a much broader constituency of support, including new funding sources for this work. Like, we don't have to call it green, green, green. It's not just green. It's contributing to major, and should be designed to contribute to major urban priorities across our region and our province, including affordable housing, including public health, including local job creation, and resilience. And others. I mean, those are four that we look at within the Transform TO plan. So we're thinking about co-benefits in that area. Opens the doors to speak to a lot more people, including different types of funders, to find our shared interest. And it was mentioned that I'm an accredited partnership broker. I've trained in this area for 5 or 6 years because I think building multi-sectoral collaborations around climate work or any other complex type of problem we're trying to solve is kind of at the center of everything. We have to talk to one another. We have to guard against that polarity that we're dealing with, so we can come up with some solutions we can all agree to and advance together. Thanks.
Okay, there's a new benchmark. Yeah. Mary hit the time right on. Well done, Mary. That was awesome. Okay, next I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Ranson. Jeff is the GTA Regional Director for the Canada Green Building Council. Jeff leads green building market engagement in Southern Ontario through the CAGBC's Greater Toronto chapter. For over a decade, Jeff has been active in education, training, and strategy for the green building industry in Ontario. Notably, Jeff has led the design of several market transformation frameworks for low carbon development, both in Canada through the Toronto 2030 District and internationally in Peru, Mexico, and Costa Rica, with a focus on mapping complex systems in the development value chain. Jeff's topic this evening is getting to zero carbon buildings. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Paul. So I think I'm going to take a slightly different tack. I'm going to go up as high level as we can go, 10,000 square feet or above. I think what you've seen from the speakers so far, and you'll see further, is that there's a lot of stuff going on. We're talking about buildings and cities. It's incredibly complex, and I want to try to give you maybe a sense of the full scope of the complexity, and then help maybe organize it a little bit in your thinking. So, jump ahead, I'll talk a little bit about the Canada Green Building Council. For those of you who don't know us, we are a national nonprofit association. We really play two roles, advocating for green building fundamentally through education, government relations, the provision of tools like the LEED green building rating system. And we're also also an industry association, so we represent the architects and engineers and developers who work on green buildings. LEED is probably the product we're most well known for. We have certified well over, I think, 1 billion square feet of real estate across Canada is LEED certified at one level or another. And you can see sort of sectorally how that's broken down in terms of square footage of new construction. So it's made some pretty significant inroads over the last decade or so. Okay. When we talk about carbon from buildings at a national scope, Ontario is a really big priority, and it doesn't always mean the same thing. So part of the complexity, we'll start right off, is carbon in buildings. What does it mean? And a lot of that is really a factor of the energy sources we use in buildings, and that's regionally dependent. So in Ontario, we have one of the most complicated energy grids to work with because it's a mixed grid. So we use hydroelectricity sometimes, we have a nuclear base load, we use gas in peak hours. And so it really depends on what time of day, what time of year you're using energy that influences the emissions factor of the building. If you're in Quebec, where you're almost all hydroelectric, electricity is almost always greener. If you're in Saskatchewan, Alberta, where it's fossil fuel-based electricity, using gas, as I say, using gas in a building in the short term is probably the greener option until they green the grid. So understanding that, you can sort of see nationally, we have a lot of emissions, not so much because of our grid, but because we have a lot of buildings and a blended grid to manage. So the first thing that we did at CDBC to get a grasp of this, and this is the first standard of its kind in the world, was to develop a way to measure carbon in buildings and provide a standard framework so that we can measure that and certify buildings against that. This was launched last year, the Zero Carbon Building Standard. We have certified 3 buildings to date in Canada, 2 new construction design buildings and 1 existing building in Ottawa. We have 16 pilot projects all across the country in various stages of development, all pursuing zero carbon. So this is an achievable target. We are measuring it. People are designing to it. They're building to it. These buildings are open. Some of them you can go see. Evolve 1 in Waterloo is opening this fall. Mohawk College's Joy Center in Hamilton is now open as well. And we'll be taking students in this year. So we know how to build zero carbon buildings. And we saw some examples of some different projects that are pursuing really high levels. So again, we come back to the question of why aren't all buildings zero carbon? What's stopping us from getting there? Here's just some of the projects I mentioned, the 3 certified buildings. Well, this is one in Toronto. It's a retrofit government building that's underway. It's not certified. So I want to talk a bit about the diffusion of innovations. Anybody familiar with this map? This is a really simple model. Cell phones, personal computers, cars, you name it. Any new technology passes through a pretty typical innovation curve where it moves from the early innovators who are just trying something because it's interesting to the early adopters that want the latest and greatest technology before it moves into the mainstream acceptance and is widely used. But what they find is that not every technology makes it all the way down the curve. There's something called the chasm. And the chasm is where technology goes to die. It's where your Betamax went. It's where your Palm Pilot went. So I want to look at zero carbon buildings as a diffusion of innovation challenge. Our role at CHUC is to figure out how do we get across the chasm? How do we get zero carbon buildings across the chasm? And I'll define the chasm in my view, because this is really complex systems, that there's really just 2 big obstacles. One is uncertainty. Even though I'd say we can build zero carbon buildings, there's a massive amount of uncertainty. Does it really work? Are those the right technologies? People have a bias towards things they know. Even if they know they are worse than what they want, they will choose the thing they know over the unknown. So uncertainty is the first one, inertia is the second. So we're fighting those two major forces in the marketplace, uncertainty and inertia. So I'm going to ask a question, and this is interactive. Maybe in my 10 minutes we can get into this. So we have to move the entire market. We know we have technologies to do this. We know where we want to go. We want to have zero carbon or carbon positive buildings. What's the most important thing we can do? Does anyone have an idea? Think about it. As a community, as a country, what's the one most important thing you can do?
Educate people properly?
Educate people properly. So customers, the public, tell them who? Professionals?
Everyone?
Education.
Demonstrates success.
Sure, get some pilot projects going.
Get the buy-in from property management.
Yeah, sell industry on it, right?
Make it profitable.
Profitable. Financial incentives, motivators.
Legislation?
Legislation, regulate it. Set the standard, everyone has to, everything will move. So I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges I have when we talk to people about this is that people are reductionists. They always want to get down to the magic bullet, the domino. If we can just find the right thing to do and flick it, everything else will fall in place, right? So we just set the regulation, just set the targets, industry will hit the level. Make it financially profitable to do the thing that we want to do. Developers are profit motivated, they'll do the right thing. Well, developers only build what customers want. If you just educate consumers to demand it, all the developers will build that, right? So we start going in circles. So we will get stuck if we keep looking for the one most important thing to do. So what I'm going to say is market transformation requires sustained, which means over a long period of time, and aligned activity across a number of different action areas. So, and we want to create positive feedback loops. So if we look at all of the things that we as individuals could be doing in the marketplace to transform the market, you can broadly put them in 10 big buckets. These are things that need to happen. So we need measurement frameworks. We need to know, we want zero carbon buildings. What is a zero carbon building? How do we measure carbon? How do we know we're achieving that goal? You need that metric. We need technical solutions. We need to know how to design the buildings. We need to know how to operate them properly. And this is a lot of times where we stop. I go to conferences, we talk about green building, we talk about the technologies, the metrics, the data, we kind of stop there. But we need the economics, we need the economic models, we need financial tools, we need the right price signals, we need all of that. We need to have socialization, which means we need to talk to the general public, we need to talk to people who occupy buildings, we need to talk to politicians, we need to get people familiar with these ideas so that they see them, they want them, they recognize them, they know how to use them. We need to train the industry so they can actually implement the best practices that we know how to do. We need policy that allows it and that encourages it. We need the legal frameworks that enable it. We need infrastructure integration so your buildings are connected to the power systems and the transportation systems and the sewage systems and all these other pieces that buildings need to exist. And then we need a whole marketplace. We need the supply chains, the manufacturing, the economies of scale to deliver all the stuff that we need. And finally, we need mobilization and leadership. There is no market transformation initiative that's never worked without people, groups of people leading the change. So I'll say no one action will drive market transformation, but the failure to do any one of those things or to have action in any one of those areas will stop. So our role, collectively, because nobody's going to be able to do all that stuff, is to make sure that we are constantly out there reaching out, working with people to make sure that there's stuff happening in all of those areas in the same direction. So I've just done a little map of things that are happening right now, not even the technical side. I'm a technical dilettante. I can talk about green buildings, but it's mostly fake, right? It's really about what's, how do we get these good ideas out there to scale? But you can see that there's so much going on. We have standards like zero carbon. We have energy, water reporting, and benchmarking legislation that all providing data. The things in red are things that we're really missing the boat on, things that I think we need. So this may just inspire you to say, wow, there's some great progress, but where do we really need pushes in the marketplace to fill some of these gaps? And I mean, you can segment these by building type, by region, geography, but some of the big ones I want to focus on really, carbon pricing was a huge miss, the creating price signals. The financial incentives and systems, I think is going to be a real challenge to figure out how we make up for that missing piece. And obviously government leadership is critical down at the bottom. So, we have been promised a climate change action plan in Ontario. We had one, we're really anticipating a new one. So we're waiting to see what that looks like. And I'm a very optimistic person. This is the word in it. But this is my really quick mental map of market transformation for low carbon buildings in Ontario. And I'm happy to have that.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I'm very happy to see that really dedicated people like Jeff are helping to guide our whole industry and make sure that we keep doing the things that we need to be doing. And I think one of the things that all of us in this room can be doing, because we're entering a municipal election cycle, is make sure that everybody who comes canvassing to your door takes the message back to their candidate that we are concerned about carbon emissions from buildings in our city, and make sure that every political candidate, every municipal councillor candidate understands that that is one of our priorities. So I'll get off my soapbox now. Okay, next we're going to hear from Larry Bryden. Larry is the VP of Business Development and Regulatory Affairs with Cricket Energy. Larry is responsible for strategic planning and industry relations. He is a lead AP with extensive experience in the energy efficiency and carbon reduction NGO marketplace. Larry currently sits on the board of directors for IISB, Enerquality Corporation, and the Canadian Energy Efficiency Alliance, and is a director and past chair of Sustainable Buildings Canada. As current board member for BUILD, the Building Industry and Land Development Association, he co-chaired the startup of Industry's Green Committee, and has served as a founding board member and past chair of the Canada Green Building Council's Toronto chapter. Larry chaired the Energy Subcommittee as a member of the team that developed Lead Canada for Neighbourhood Development, and has been active in the development of the Energy Star for New Homes, one of those labeling programs that Jeff was working for, and Multifamily Buildings Program. He is currently leading the Sustainable Buildings Canada initiative to bring Energy Strong International to Canada, and is part of the team that developed and now delivers the Enbridge and Union Gas Savings by Design programs. Larry will be presenting Sustainable Buildings Canada's initiatives for delivering change. This is where the proverbial green rubber hits the road. SBC develops and delivers utility and government market transformation programming to the industry and its practitioners by linking policy and innovation through engagement, training, research, and development and design. Larry's topic will be delivering change, market transformation initiatives for building designers, owners, and operators. Come on up, Larry.
You know you've had this too long when you've worked with pretty much every single panel member. Great to see all of you. So we just kind of heard from Jeff talking about what is market transformation. So what I'm going to talk about are a few programs that one of the organizations I work with, Sustainable Buildings Canada, actually delivers. So we hear a lot of talk about these initiatives and technologies and design and carbon, but we hear a lot of it at the policy level. So how do we drive this down to the actual designers and practitioners who are going to build these buildings or retrofit these buildings on a daily basis, every single day? And that's really sort of the area that we work in. So coming from a engineering background, I don't have all the big pretty pictures and everything that all the great speakers have. I'm more of a bureaucrat. So who we are, Sustainable Buildings Canada is a registered not-for-profit. We've been delivering market transformation programs since around 2003. We're a fee-for-service consultancy to governments, utilities, and municipalities. But as a not-for-profit with no share value, all of the profit that we earn in those exercises rolls back into further programming. So that's essentially where our money comes from. So we're not so dependent on the government funding, although some of our programs do touch on that. Design and delivery agency for leading high-performance construction and retrofitting programs. We're the go-to people for how do you move markets. And we focus on sustainable development and green buildings through the integrated design process. And I'm going to keep coming back to this integrated design process because it's that really formulates our thinking and is the foundation of all of our programming. So just what is integrated design? The integrated design process was developed here in Canada, actually, by Natural Resources Canada. It was an initiative that was first started in order to figure out why every single government building ran about 30% over in cost. So we really weren't at that point looking at rebuilding or making them high-performance buildings. We were looking at why does everything cost more when the government builds it? So that was the basis of the research, the foundation of the research. But as they worked through that, what they determined was it really wasn't a technology problem or a process problem. It was actually a design issue. It's that our design infrastructure typically works with a developer who has an idea of what he wants to build based on land parameters. He hands that off to an architect. The architect designs the beautiful buildings. I work a lot in the condo sector, so let's get those artist renderings out the door so that we can start selling our condos. And in that process, the entire building virtually gets designed as an architectural rendering. So because of that, the other design disciplines don't really come into the process until later. So what we strive to do is to bring everybody to the table very early in the design stage to identify what are the pain points, what are the challenges you're trying to overcome, and work through those challenges. I come from a mechanical background, originally started in residential, and the biggest problem I had was my ducts went this way and the joists went that way. I only got 8 feet of ceiling. What am I going to do? I'm going to put the duct underneath that, and now my basements are 7'2" instead of 8 feet. But if both that designer and the architect were in the same room at the same time, that mechanical guy would have said, hey, how am I going to get over there? So that's just one example of the challenges that design faces and how we overcome those. So initially first, we establish a project team, make sure everybody is at the table that needs to be at the table. And when I talk about design, I just don't talk about the architect and the engineer. I talk about the end use. So if I'm going to build a school, well, let's get the teachers in there. And better yet, let's bring in some of those students to help inform our decisions, design decisions, from the very beginning. There's a whole variety of project considerations. I don't have my glasses, so I'm not going to read them. But you can see what you're really looking for is quality. We want a good quality building. We have the designs. There's a variety of solutions we're going to work towards. There's going to be a consultation and an iterative process where we're all going to get together. We're going to kind of start with some rough ideas. We're going to go away, we're going to research them, but then we're going to come back again, and we're going to refine those ideas, and we're going to go away, we're going to research them some more, and then we're all going to come back again, and we're going to refine those even further. And through that, what the government determined was, well, that's how we reduce our construction costs. So, but at the same time, the government was starting to look at the whole field of sustainability, and they applied those principles, and they were able to actually design those principles in as well. So this sort of speaks to the integrated design process, and even in something like this, we're practicing an integrated design as we speak. Page here. So the first major funded program, we were always sort of funded in bits and pieces by governments. We started out being funded by CLHC, with the original delivery of the Savings by Design program. And then through a variety of different other sectors, including the utilities, and finally now we're working with the gas utilities. What you may not know, or maybe you do, is that the utilities have a mandate to reduce what they deliver. Kind of counterintuitive to a businessman, but the government mandates that each of these utilities will reduce the consumption by a dollar amount. So part of that is done through programming that's very specific, and you can say that if I replace this thermostat, this is the total amount that I'm going to reduce, or the total amount of energy I'm going to be able to reduce it by, and I can therefore apply that rate money to these programs, and there will be a net gain from that. The other side of the market is market transformation. It's a little fuzzier because it's a little harder to quantify. That's the world that we kind of work in. So Savings by Design is a green building initiative. It's created to help builders design and construct high-performance buildings. The way the program works is we introduce the development community to integrated design. So we take actual projects that are being built. We're now somewhere around 250 to 300 delivered projects in this program. And we bring them in and we look at the various ways that we can get them to a higher than code performance level. And that ranges between 50 and 25% right now, but typically targeting a stretch target of what would be considered net zero ready. So we heard about net zero earlier. Net zero, in its simplest definition, means that your building, your lot, produces as much energy as you consume. So that's the simplest definition. So to be net zero ready, we do all of the things we talked about with Passive House in order to get it to a point where the amount of renewable energy that we require is so small that we can afford it, and we have surface area that we can cover with solar panels, because that's typically the way we go. So the comprehensive program offers support, financial incentives during the design, construction, and commissioning stage. A lot of these programs are designed, so it's not really taken through to the final building itself, but in this particular project they have to demonstrate through the commissioning that they actually built the way they designed it. So this is funded through Enbridge, and Enbridge just bought Union Gas, but we were delivering the program for Union Gas before that as well. So we can move to the next slide. So what does it look like? We have a full-day moderated design workshop. We bring in a developer, and then we bring in industry practitioners. We have about 300 different industry practitioners that span the full range of sustainability. So we're looking not only at the energy consumption, but we're looking at land use, we're looking at planning, we're looking at community energy systems, we're looking at the building envelope, the windows, all of the elements that would contribute to that, in order to get them to achieve this higher level of design. So we engage their design and their construction staff, but we also ask that they bring in their sales staff so that we can educate them as well. Again, all of the industry experts, and if they achieve this higher level than code, they receive a cash incentive. So this sort of hits a bunch of those points, starting with how do we do it? What are the tools and who are the experts that we need to talk to about that? And then in the end, you slide them a little bit of cash and everybody is happy. And if we can move on. So the next one that I'm going to speak to is one that when Jeffrey used to work for us, he developed and launched for us. So the 2030 District is actually a North American program covering a variety of different cities, with specific goals to achieve by 2030, that goal being carbon neutral. So I have about 2 minutes, so I'm not going to go much further into this. You can just flip to the next slide. Effectively, what the program does is you identify a geographic area, and within that area, you encourage the occupants of that area, primarily large buildings, to measure, what Jeffrey was talking about earlier, their consumption, and then benchmark that consumption against other buildings in order to name and shame the development community to improve their buildings. So serves to increase information sharing, promotes district-wide benchmarking, aggregates that performance data. Within Toronto, we go from Bathurst to the Don Valley Parkway and Waterfront to DuPont. So that is the 2030 district program. You can go on to the last one. So the last one is one that I'm leading right now, and I'm leading this because I was doing a presentation in Europe on building labeling systems for new construction, and had it pointed out to me by a large group that, you know, that's nice, but by 2030, only about 2% of all of the buildings in the world are going to be new. So there's 98% of the rest of those buildings that exist out there. If we don't deal with them, we don't have a hope in hell of dealing with those, the big problem by addressing only new construction. So in this particular initiative, market transformation strategy to bring net zero housing by 2030. If you just flip to the next slide real quick. Developed and initially delivered in the Netherlands. They aggregated 200,000 units of social housing. providers to get together and say to the private sector, we have all this business, you guys develop us some solutions to get our homes to net zero energy fuel cost. And we'll use the money that we used to pay for the utility to fund that work. So in the Netherlands, through that, they were able to engage the private sector, drove down the construction cost by 50% over a 7-year period to retrofit these buildings to net zero. And they did that through what you saw earlier, the automated panelized manufacturing. Essentially, they come in and they reclad the entire building, put new windows in it, and it all comes in a truck, and they do it in 1 day. Savings are guaranteed through P3 agreements. So that's the work that we do, and if you want to find out more, because we're a nonprofit, I have no problem with shamelessly plugging our initiative. So if you can throw that up, we have a conference coming up in October, Healthy Buildings, Healthy Planets. We bring speakers from all around the world to participate in this. Bang for your buck at $195. This is the best conference there is available. So we've been doing this since 2003, delivering this particular conference. And as the MC of the last 5 of them, I have to say, nobody puts programming together like I think we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. I'll echo Larry's shameless plug for the Green Building Festival. I also think that it is the best green building event in the city in the entire year. So thanks, Larry. Looking forward to seeing you there yet again. I also want to thank Larry for identifying that building retrofits, our existing building stock, and getting the energy use down in those existing buildings is the elephant in the room. And that is a great segue to our next panelist, Suzanne Wiltshire. Suzanne has a passion for efficiency of all types. Suzanne believes in making the world a better place without depleting its precious resources. Specializing in renewable energy design and application to the built environment, Suzanne has led engineering consulting, municipal utility, and owner-developer business units, completing more than 50 geothermal, wind, hydro, and biomass energy projects. Currently at Mitsubishi Electric, Suzanne leads high-rise building projects through mechanical system design and installation, adding efficiency to bring low-carbon technical solutions that surpass 2021 standards and beyond. Suzanne is proud to be a member of the team responsible for Evolve 1, we heard about that earlier, in Waterloo, for Evolve 1, a 110,000 square foot commercial building opening this month in Waterloo, which received the first zero carbon design certificate in Canada from the CAGBC. Jeff mentioned it. Suzanne is past president of the Ontario Geothermal Association, advisory member of the Atmospheric Fund, Pumping Energy Savings, and Advancing Deep Energy Retrofits projects. Suzanne is a member of the CSA, C448 Geothermal Standards Committee, and occasional contributor to the Sustainable Buildings Canada Savings by Design, which we also just heard about. See how we all link together here? Suzanne's a contributor to the SBC Savings by Design charrettes. Suzanne enjoys meeting new colleagues, exchanging new ideas, and taking on challenging new projects to continually produce better living by using less. And Suzanne's topic is building energy retrofits, the elephant in the room.
Thank you very much, Paul. So, you know what? That allows me to walk around anyway. So we've heard that Drawdown does not measure retrofits. I beg to differ. It's big. You don't need a number. It's not only big, it's the biggest. So let's talk about it. So, you can read all of this, I won't. Basically at the bottom, constructing new green buildings alone will not achieve the 2030 GHG emission reduction targets.
The Canadian Green Building Council research confirms that national targets can only be reached by reducing the emissions of millions of square feet of existing institutional, commercial, and residential buildings. So when we go to the Green Building Council, at least I do, for a lot of tools. They're excellent at that. They've really identified key hot spots. They've delved into what are the real problems, and they've come up with a whole list of solutions. So I encourage you to spend some time on their websites, look at their tools. It's really excellent to try and understand. But these are 5 of the main problems, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. Some of the solutions, you've got to focus on carbon. Forget about just energy reduction or other metric numbers. Start measuring that carbon. It's key. And then we get down through a whole list of other suggestions. So again, the action plan that the Green Building Council has come up with is really quite comprehensive. So I'll just skip through it a little bit, but recommissioning buildings, going back to older buildings, looking at how are they performing from a very technical point of view. Measure it. If you don't measure it, you can't change it. Deep retrofits, that requires looking at it holistically, integrated design, looking at how can we best spend the money on that particular building to make it better. And switch to low carbon fuel sources. There's just no getting around it, folks. We've got to get rid of the carbon fuels. We have to. On-site renewable energy systems. Renewable energy works best when it's micro, when it's at site, behind the meter, and it's working for the building. So this was one measure. Who did that? Carlson, the impact value. So basically they measured what were the criteria and what were the stumbling blocks. So the 2 biggest ones, as you can see, financial, that's always the key. I just have a question though. Why is it that because a light bulb cost X number of dollars 50 years ago, a light bulb today has to cost $50 minus 1? Why is that? That price was set years and years and years ago. And all of a sudden now we have to comply and even be better. Sometimes there's better value. Sometimes it's just worth more. So available capital and financial criteria. You can see that finance is a huge piece of this equation. We are tackling that. The Investors Confidence Project is very important. Again, they're putting together a program where you can certify the energy reduction that's achieved within a building, and therefore that gives more security to the financing. How to start? I'm going to skip very quickly through this one. This is just basically a process. There is a flow, there is a method, there's a way to do this. So any building can look this up and you can follow it. It's a footprint. You have to look at all conservation measures, not just one. I work in the energy world of buildings in the HVAC sector, but we still consider all of the elements of the building in every time we consider any building at all. Windows is huge, especially in retrofit buildings, older buildings. Leaky windows, both water, I've seen water destroy whole floors in living rooms just because they're seeping in constantly. And then of course the air. Lighting, that's an easy one. We've got lots of lighting solutions, particularly now that we have LED. Insulation, cladding, as Larry was talking about, but there's all kinds of different ways to seal up a building. And controls, functioning, getting people educated. How do they operate the building? What are the times? What are the temperatures? But controls are very, most buildings don't have controls. They really don't. So what's a building energy retrofit? I'm looking at the energy sector now. It's basically the energy system. So traditionally, we have boilers, chillers, coolers. That means natural gas for heating, typically, and electricity for cooling, for air conditioning. In many, many retrofit buildings, the air conditioning is non-existent. The climate wasn't as warm as it is today. We're getting warmer every year. So air conditioning is becoming very important. One building I will mention about is schools. If you think about a school, many years ago when certainly I went to public school, the school shut down for 3-4 months of the year. It was never used beyond 5 o'clock in the evening. There's a huge resource. There's a community hall, there's a building that has many, many applications and much value to the community. But sometimes you need to put some air conditioning in it so it can be used over the summer. Electric baseboard heaters, don't get me going on that. This is one building we're looking at, 2 Bloor Street West. So just to show you that it's not limited to just individual small houses or small buildings. High-rise buildings have to be retrofitted as well. This particular building is huge. It's right on a key piece of real estate, prime office, and yet the HVAC system in it is completely at life. And they're having real trouble, particularly on certain suites and certain floors. What we've discovered, and it's not just this building, I've looked at many of these, what happens when we start taking out the great big huge old mechanical equipment, we find out that lo and behold, there's rentable, leasable space. So that space can be converted and leased, and that helps pay for the HVAC retrofit. So it's very economical, it's very financially feasible, and the paybacks become actually extremely enticing. This is just showing you some of the system that we've considered there. In the beginning, you were told that I work for Mitsubishi Electric. We have a technology called variable refrigerant flow. And what that is heat pumps, basically. I won't go into all the details, but in this particular building, we could put in some water source condensers, a simple fan coil in a ceiling, and we could do the entire building very easily from the inside. So heat recovery. That's something that's very important when you talk about heating systems in buildings. We use a lot of heat, we produce it, but then we're cooling other areas. And in some buildings, I was in one the other day, where their heating and cooling bills are fighting each other. They're at the same time. If you get the cooling bill and the heating bill from the same month, they're both astronomical. I mean, it's crazy. They don't know how to turn off one system. It just doesn't, the building doesn't work that way. So in this case, heat recovery, we have fan coils that will absorb heat and take it away, put it into basically a diffuser, which is the little box up there, and then it'll send it back out into other spaces in the building that require the heat. And that's before we generate any more heat. That's without turning on the condensers. And that happens for a great amount of time during the year. So why is refrigerant more efficient? It just is. You can read all this data. It just is. It's a whole lot more efficient because of the physics and chemistry. This is another building that was retrofitted a number of years ago, actually in Detroit, 19 stories. In this case, they saved about $1.5 million on the project, on the capital project, from what a traditional system was going to cost them. And the reason that was because the refrigerant piping fits through the interior of the building through very small cavities and risers. They didn't need to rip apart walls and ceilings and the structure of the building to get the system to retrofit in. This was a Pioneer Co-op housing project that we did here in Toronto, and it's townhouses. So in this case, we were able to put condensers outside on the outside patios, and then we ran the lines inside to the fan coils that were mounted under the floor and up in the attic. So why do you want to retrofit? Well, these are some of the suggestions in Toronto. First of all, record real estate sale prices. I mean, I think you're all familiar with that. Space scarcity, you might not realize this, but Toronto, particularly office space, but even housing as well, is extremely scarce. And that's why the prices are going sky high. There is a high demand, and that is spurring a whole lot of new construction. So these older buildings now have to compete with those new construction, shiny buildings. And technology is shifting value. Building automation systems, people are looking for all these things. They're asking for it. They want to know how the building works, increased comfort, operating costs. So that's becoming a real value to buyers and renters. Scarcity, office, 3.3% vacancy in Toronto. That's pretty darn low, folks. Go and try and find one of those 3.3s if you're looking for space. Asset value, again, I won't get into too much of the financing here, but it simply makes sense financially. There are increasing interest rates, but at the same time, the returns and the cap rates on this commercial real estate are still much higher. So the numbers work on financing. There are big numbers. I said we had a big number for retrofits, right? The numbers on the right are Ontario, and these are numbers from TAF, from one of the committees that I sat on. So this shows you in multi-residential buildings that are electrically heated. This was the sector we're really trying to get at to retrofit, partly because it's very doable. We know where they are and who they are, and those electric buildings do not have gas, and they do not have ductwork running through them. So how do you physically retrofit them? Well, you can with heat pumps and with refrigerant lines. So we're looking at getting at those. Huge energy savings and huge carbon reduction. In Canada, the numbers are even bigger, of course, and when you look at the impact by 2030, it's massive. Not just on those buildings and on carbon reduction, but on the jobs that are created. It's actually responsible for 32.5 billion of GDP. That's huge to the economy. We just need to roll up our sleeves and get to work. Elephant, he's definitely with us.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I'm very glad to hear that not only should and must retrofits be done, but also that it's possible, both financially and technologically. So what possible reason do we have to not do it? So that's very heartening. So thank you very much, Suzanne. We're closing in on the final panelists, and then we'll get to the exciting interactive part of the evening. So next up is Phil Fung. Phil is a designated consulting engineer in Ontario and is a professor at Humber College. Phil owns a patent in indoor vertical gardening ecosystem, which is based on bio-inspired design principles. And Phil's topic this evening will be bio-inspired regenerative building design. So slight shift from what we've been talking about so far this evening, but a very nice shift. So come on up, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for inviting me to come to here. See, this is after 1 hour of presentation, right? So at school, we have a 3 hours course, right? So 3 hours. Sometimes the student, after 1 hour, they really try to stay awake, but they cannot. You know what I would do? You know, I can speak really loud. So at certain area, I will just speak a little bit louder, and I see the student will wake up. I'm sorry, this is... Anyway, I'm going to do a little bit of shift from what you have been listening about the entire really great vision and how the entire community, the entire building sectors. I am an engineer. All right, I'm not a biologist. No. Okay. So I start I do a lot of energy modeling and lead, administration management stuff, right? Since 2005, I work at the lead systems buildings. So after 6-8 years, I see lead is very important because some of the industry practices because of lead. So I have to give credit to lead. But some of the buildings that I help to certify as LEED certified, I'm not convinced that is a green building. All right, so I ask myself, what is a green building? What is it? How can a green building be more authentic than just people trying to make up points? So around 6 years ago, I looked into something else. how to make a green building. Okay, and then around 4 years ago, I spin off another company called High Garden. Nature. Period. Finished. Oh, by the way, I'm going to talk about I'm going to give you a very brief introduction of a 1-hour seminar which I will deliver at the Home Builder Expo at the end of this year. So if you are interested in knowing more, feel free to come to that seminar. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction of this seminar. Nature is like a farm. You will grow organic food. A school, it will provide very interactive learning experiences. A purification plant, it removes VOC from atmosphere. A health clinic, it enhances the well-being of people. A community center, it facilitates activities and interaction of people. And air filtration plant, it removes pollutants from water sources. Okay. And finally, it's a self-sustaining engine. It doesn't require any synthetic inputs for nature to operate. So this is nature, right? So, but yeah, okay, so beautiful, right? Where are we? We are here. We spend over 90% of time indoors. So what should we do? So we know about nature, how beautiful, these 7 beautiful functions, so natural, so organic, and we are indoors. What should we do? No, this is not real. This is not realistic. In many cases, we just have to stay here. And we just have to stay indoors. Why? Because of the many reasons. Because of the weather, because of our health conditions, because of many reasons. So, I think the biggest innovation of the 21st century will be at the intersection of biology and technology. Okay? This is what Steve Jobs once said. Breathe in. Since nature is the most beautiful, and we, like it or not, we have to spend really over 90% of time indoors. Okay? So what can we do? Bring in, bring nature in. So the topic that I'm going to deliver is what we call bio-inspired regenerative building design. So it's a design approach that is inspired by and to be harmonized with nature. So this survey in 2017 is talking about wellness, and is the main features of new building design or the new sustainability of buildings. And if you look at the green buildings design trend, you talk about wellness, healthy building, healthy home. Health is going to be the most important design criteria for the next century. So the purpose of doing this design approach is to provide a net positive health for the well-being of the occupants. The purpose of this approach is to provide a net positive health environment for the occupants. So most of you may know about these 7 dimensions of wellness. So the purpose of this design is to look at how we can promote the wellness of the occupants. So we based on, out of those 7, we based on these 5, because the other 2 is still in the research stage, you know. So a farm, a school, air purification plant, health clinic, and a community center. So out of these 5, you know, so it will cover a different aspect of this 7 dimension of wellness. So I'm going to propose what we call a naturalistic design modules. Not naturalistic, it's naturalistic design modules. So is there 5 components? A farm, a farm plant, school, health clinic, and community center. And the purpose of this ND naturalistic design module is to bring.
What is ND?
Oh, sorry, it's a naturalistic design. I'm just a little bit lazy. You know, it's writing all this naturalistic design. Sorry, so I use ND, right? So, and the purpose of these naturalistic design modules is to bring nature indoors. So think about if we can bring healthy organic food, clean air, nature therapy, 5D. We need nature's 5D learning experiences. Okay, not 4D, and while bringing an interactive community. So this design modules, they are selectable. Depends on the occupants and space characteristics. So it's what we call occupants-oriented design. We base on occupants. The entire design is based on occupants. Because at the same space, different occupants, you may need a different design. Just because of their different occupants. You know, they have different backgrounds, so they look at things differently. So the modules, they are designed or engineered to imitate nature. To engineer nature. This is what we call a biomimetic design. Is the biological principles that to address the human need. Okay, so because we have a controlled environment, so we can design our principles that imitate nature, and this is what we call indoor regenerative design. Sorry, I'll go a little bit faster, because so okay, keep carry on. So and the objective is to deliver the 7 dimensions of wellness. Your health is your real wealth. Health is everything. All right. So and this design is actually an ecosystem. So these five functions, they actually have a symbiotic relationship. When you deliver these 5, they're all related in an ecosystem, in a symbiotic. And this ecosystem is actually the most resilient system. Once they work together, it's an ecosystem. It's the most resilient system. This is the way. This is from a master that we do. Our way, it can recover much faster. Okay, yeah. So okay, carry on. So I don't think I have enough time here. It's okay. All right. Now, how to design these 5 modules? I'm going to give you a summary. For farm, scalable, low symmetric chemical, and then for school is an indoor ecosystem right there with biodiversity. Air purification is it will remove the VOC, and then health clinic is more about biophysical design, and also community center that can create ownership and create what we call the intergenerational activities. Okay, so bottom line, the purpose of doing this is when you are discouraged, dejected, depressed, you go into this house. Because of this regenerative design, you come up with more refresh, rejuvenate, and renew. Alright? So this is the purpose of what we call an indoor regenerative environment. And that will give you that positive health. That also means you are bad, you get in, you get better. Means that's net positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. No pressure, but I think Phil's putting his hand right. It's also very interesting that Phil was taking us to a place where the building is creating an indoor environment that is healthy for us. And Donald Peckover, our next speaker, will show us how buildings can produce better health for the environment around the building. So now we're going to look at the outside. So Donald is a colleague of mine at Sustainable TO, and Donald has experience in designing and building homes and communities across North America, including disaster-prone areas such as the Atlantic coasts of Florida and Far Rockaway, New York, as well as environmentally conscious designs for the Oak Ridges Moraine here in Ontario. And that's what he'll be speaking about this evening. Donald believes that in designing in these sensitive areas, it is important to respect nature and the environment in order to reduce disaster risk and to promote positive change in homes and neighborhoods. Donald's topic will be net positive developments, improving the ecosystem around them. So, good luck, Donald.
Thank you, Paul. My topic is net positive developments to improve the ecosystem. And the main shift that we have to have in our own brains these days is to shift from the idea that all development is bad to one that has an idea that all development can be good. Because we have to have a positive impact on our landscapes and on our ecosystems, both in terms of our environments and our social ecosystems as well, in order to draw down carbon from our atmosphere and have a positive impact on our environments. So we believe that all architecture can be sustainable, and it's really simple strategies to strive towards the net positive. You've heard a number of different ideas tonight about how that can be achieved, and our simple ideas are reduce carbon, reduce waste, reduce energy, and reduce cost in order to get to a positive impact on our ecosystem and environment. So we have an opportunity before us in creating positive impact communities and developments in these sensitive ecosystems. And Paul mentioned East Gwillimbury and the Oak Ridges Moraine in Ontario, and that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Ideally, we would avoid any type of development in these ecologically sensitive areas because it does have traditionally a negative impact. But like I mentioned, we need to change that more towards the positive. Regulations are put in place to curb sprawl and rampant paving of environments. But we need to, again, avoid that and get towards a positive impact to fight ecological change and social consequences of poor urban development and climate change. So the first thing that we need to understand is what is the green belt and how the infrastructure of cities interacts with these ecologically sensitive areas. So surrounding Toronto and the greater GTA is the green belt, Ontario green belt. Encompasses the Niagara Escarpment, the Holland March, and the Oak Ridges Moraine, and it was introduced in 2001. It protects prime agricultural land, heritage sites, and sensitive areas, and it helps to combat urban sprawls. But of huge importance to Toronto, especially, is the Oak Ridges Moraine, which acts as a huge aquifer and natural water filtration system for our natural drinking water. It's a huge area. It's over 200 million square feet, which is bigger than the size of PEI. I mean,
That was given to us by Edmund J. Zavitz, too, you know.
I'm
He
sorry?
was the first environmental engineer of Ontario from 1920 to 1955. He gave us conifer trees there, and we've got beautiful landscape. We've got trees and plants to the whole Oak Ridges Moraine there. Dr. Edmund J. Zavitz.
Great, thank you very much.
Like he's just a great man.
Yeah, so on my next slide, it again delves into the importance of the environment in the Oak Ridges Moraine. It's home to 78 at-risk species. It sustains 65 natural river systems, and the forestry and agriculture and trees in the Oak Ridges Moraine and the Greenbelt offsets 27 million cars driven over 1 year. It has a big environmental impact, so we don't want to pave over and get rid of it completely, but there is a pressure on it to have positive impact. So population growth in the GTA, and especially in Toronto, there's intense pressure to grow out and grow up because there is a demand for downtown condos close to services Since 1981, a lot of land has been lost just to poor management and poor ecological protections, and it's permanently lost. We can't get it back. And what we need to do is make sure that going forward, future development in these areas has a positive impact, so it's not permanently lost. Just a quick snapshot of development in Southern Ontario. I'm going to run quickly through some maps. In the gray area, you see Toronto and GTA, and in the green areas, the areas that will soon become regulated by the Greenbelt protection. Development in 1981 starts to grow out in the yellow areas. Bigger still in 1991. 2001, we see it starting to get into areas where it will soon be designated as Greenbelt, and in 2005, that's when the protections were put in place. However, we still see that in 2011, there's still this expansion going into the Greenbelt, because there are currently over 600 applications for residential developments of varying scales within these protected areas. And we don't want those to be negative impact developments. We want these to be positive impact developments, because the city's going to keep on growing, because there's huge population pressure and there's a huge demand. And we end up with situations like this, developments that are built with 2-car garages, wide boulevards and turning circles right next to prime farmers' lands. And we need to make sure there's better integration between both of these ideas.
How?
It's a very good question.
That's really how. I'm.
Here comes the solution.
Yeah.
So again, we're trying to create a positive impact with these types of developments that are happening anyways. It's not as if we can stop them. There's a demand. There's these applications that are in, and we want to make sure that we're doing them in the most responsible way possible. And to do so, we need to look at the site ecology. Within the Greenbelt, there's a lot of different types of forests and agricultural land. Coniferous plantations. Scotch pine, unfortunately, is an invasive species that was planted in the mid-1900s.
What's wrong with that?
Scotch pine creates a dangerous monoculture, so if it does have a disease, it wipes out everything entirely. The needles do fall down and deaden the undergrowth, creates a deciduous swell condition that prevents further growth. And that's why we like lots of different types of plants, trees, and animals in these ecosystems. Upland hardwood species with native hardwoods is a great way to have natural systems that are feeding off of each other. Feeding creeks, of course, that have big impact on everybody's drinking water. With these developments, we want to make sure that we have as minimal impact on the ecology as possible. And one of the big things is transportation within these developments and within these neighborhoods themselves. What we want to try to do is to have natural streets with naturalized edge conditions and drainage swales, so we're not piping off rainwater and stormwater into municipal systems that's being treated far away. We want to make sure that it's treated naturally on site, percolates back into the ground, and helps to regenerate all those aquifers. The streets themselves need to be active streets. They need to encompass vehicular traffic. Unfortunately, we're not going to get away from that right now, so we need to improve it, as well as incorporate cycling pathways and pedestrian walkways. With transportation, you'll see different types of transportation. And with those approved sites that are currently under review, they're about 15 minutes away from a GO station. So we ran some math and found out that if all those sites were driving into Toronto, or sorry, a typical site was driving into Toronto, it would be about 500 tons of carbon every year. If we instead drove to the GO station, it would be 142 tons. And then if we promoted carpooling to the GO station, it would be 147. So it's these types of social initiatives that can have a big impact. Other ones, such as telecommuting, working from home, and not driving downtown to Toronto every day, can have a big impact too. Mike, exactly. Some other site strategies that we like to promote are shared systems using natural products, natural systems that might have a little bit of technology thrown in along the way, but they're all low carbon, no carbon you see on here is a couple of ideas, sharing farming between residents so that you can grow your own food. And with our water systems, with the black water treatment, it feeds into constructed wetlands. And constructed wetlands can have a big impact on our municipal systems. So there's the town of Cobalt in Northern Ontario, which installed a constructed wetland to treat 100% of the residents of the town. It's located right on the river, and it's so effective that it's actually helping to remove arsenic and other pollutants from the river, from the town of Cobalt, from past mining activities.
Where is Cobalt?
It's close to the Quebec border. It's in Northern Ontario. The town of Brighton is on Lake Ontario, on Presqu'île Bay. They recently installed a constructed wetland as well. It serves 25% of the population, about 800 homes, and there's no wastewater concerns because the system is pulling out all the pollutants. And these types of systems are great, but we also have to look at reduction, because if we're still throwing down 181 liters down our drain, typical Markham resident, it's not going to do good to just treat it well. We have to reduce it as well. So by using simple strategies as gray water systems and low flow toilets and rainwater irrigation, we can cut that down to 56. And that's it's a big impact. So again, those social strategies, they're not just technology, it's human usage, human patterns, it's changing the way that people live. The last one that I want to talk about is power. We've heard a lot of great ideas this evening, and we like to use solar photovoltaic panels. Each house in a certain development or neighborhood would be fitted with panels on the roof, and what that does is it would feed a localized grid to share energy between the houses. Similarly, wind power could also be used. This is Guns Hill Wind Farm in Ontario. It has 10 turbines powering 6,700 homes, generating $25,000 annually. A typical Ontario home uses 9,000 kilowatt hours of energy through simple strategies. Focusing on the building envelope, like Larry mentioned earlier, we can get that down to 2,300 by following past principles.
What if we live in apartments?
You can get it down even lower because you're not having that much exposed building envelope. And we end up with a nice, beautiful, well-integrated, ecologically sensitive residential development, which has a zero cost because all these strategies are shared between everybody using natural systems that already exist. We're trying to reinvent the wheel, we're just putting them together differently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donald. Definitely a very controversial topic that we explore often, but it is good to see that people are exploring ideas of not only reducing the carbon that's emitted by buildings, which is incredibly important, but we also need to encourage photosynthesis. We need to encourage plants, trees and other plants, and this sort of thinking of how development can actually feed the plant life around it, because it is photosynthesis that is actually nature's mechanism to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. So that is the natural mechanism that we need to start encouraging. Obviously, we have to do our part and stop putting carbon into the atmosphere, but then we have to encourage nature to actually draw it back down. So, thank you very much. That was all the panelist presentations. So, just want to give you guys a 5-minute bio break while we reset the furniture, and then we will have the Q&A, the interactive portion. So, 5-minute bio break. We got to be quick because we have to get out of here.
Seen a lot of images and a lot of facts, and heard a lot of ideas, seen a lot of models, and now we have a chance to interact with the speakers and make our comments, ask our questions. But I want to give us a chance to just have, again, a moment of pause, just to reflect and take in and really absorb a little bit what we've heard. So I'm going to offer you a couple of questions, and you can, if you want to, you can ask those questions inside. You can also ignore those questions or change them. But if you feel to, you can ask these questions as a way of integrating what you've heard. And then I'd like to give you an opportunity to take 5 minutes with a neighbor of yours just to talk about what's brewing, what's percolating for you, and really be prepared for that interaction, you know, get clear on what you might want to say or ask of the speakers. And also just have a chance to talk to somebody about what's there for you right now that you may not be able to say in the plenary. So if you feel to right now, you can ask yourself inside, what stood out for you from everything that you heard? You can literally ask that, what stood out for you? And just notice the very first thing that comes. Even if it's surprising to you. And whenever you're ready, you can ask yourself what good came from these presentations tonight. Just literally ask that, what good came, and notice the very first thing that comes to you, whatever form it takes, even if it doesn't make sense. And finally, you can ask inside what good can come from what we've heard tonight. What good can come from all of these ideas? Literally ask that. Notice what comes up for you first thing. And whatever came to you, just take a moment and imagine that happening. Imagine that it's actually happening.
It is right now.
So just take a moment and enjoy that. And as you're imagining that, notice how it feels in your body. Just notice the ripples in your body. Notice how you feel. And for the next 5 or so minutes, I'm going to invite you to turn to somebody close to you and just take those 5 minutes and share and listen whatever's there for you right now. Questions that you might have, things that aren't quite clear for you, things you're kind of stirred up about, excited or upset about, whatever you feel to share. And take about 5 minutes, and then we'll bring you back. And the moderators, I invite you to do that too. It's a great opportunity to talk with somebody in the panel and take the chance to get to know each other a little bit better, share inspirations. So just find somebody next to you and Sharon.
Lloyd Alter, Mary Pickering, Jeff Ransom, Larry Bryden, Suzanne Wilshire, Phil Thung, and Donald Andover. And I'm surprised I could do that. I'm surprised. So, you guys have now had a little bit of chance to talk to each other and kind of synthesize your thoughts. So, I'd like to know, if you guys have some burning questions that you want to address to the panelists. And first up, gentleman in blue, first contestant.
I'm fascinated by the notion of performance contracts that a number of folks mentioned, and you, Suzanne, were very specific, 3 to 5 year payback. So are performance contracts good enough that they'll pay for their own financing, and the banks are comfortable with the cash flow analysis, and can we even advertise them on TV? So I guess I think your contracts lives in those large buildings. So are they self-funding? My first question. And my second question would be, would this work on a single family home?
Okay, well that number was drawn from other sources, and it really, I think, was a number that was expressing more the appetite of the market. Like, people will accept 3 to 5 year paybacks usually. It doesn't necessarily mean that every single project is going to meet that. So every project is highly unique, and particularly a single family home. But the systems that we have today are also very, very scalable. I was approached earlier and somebody asked me, do we have one of those refrigerant systems for a single family home? Absolutely. There's residential units that will do one building. I mean, I'm very interested in Larry's Energy Strong program, because we really think that the whole house, the energy system, along with the cladding, along with the windows, along with all the other components, can be a packaged system. But you have to integrate all of the components, whether it's a retrofit or a new construction. Things have to be integrated. And if you set a goal right in the beginning that says, this is what we're looking for, what is your target? And then you mold everything to achieve that goal. So if it's low carbon, that's what you're after. If it's a 3 to 5 year payback, that's your budget. That's what you're after. So you try to look at each of the different components, how it they all interact with each other. If you change the windows, that means your heating system's changed. It's, one thing you don't do in isolation. It doesn't work that way. So the answer is yes, but you've got to be focused. You've got to consider all the different components, and you've got to work it to achieve your goal.
Let me jump in maybe. Suzanne showed the Investor Confidence Project, which was one thing around essentially enabling performance contracts. And so there are ESCOs out there, energy service corporations, that will go and do an energy performance contract for you, but they have engineering expertise and contracting expertise, and typically they look for big projects. So, a university campus would be a great candidate, or a hospital, and they'll go in, they'll do all the audits, they'll come up with an engineering plan based on what they know and what their rate of return looks like, and they'll do the work, they'll finance it, and they'll pay themselves back off the energy savings. And that works really well if you have that whole expertise. It doesn't scale down very well because the amount of design and engineering and audit work, has a downward limit. The other challenge, so there is an appetite from big financial institutions, pension funds, big banks, lenders, that want to pay for that kind of stuff. The problem they have is that they're not engineers. So if they get an engineering report that says here's energy efficiency in the building, they don't know if it's valid. They don't have the same assurance as they would if they looked at the financial report. And frankly, they want to spend $20 million, but a lot of the good retrofits might be in the $500,000 range, $1.5 million. So they need to aggregate a whole bunch of building retrofits to hit the kind of investment levels that they want to acquire as a big fund. So the Investor Confidence Project is a certification of an energy retrofit strategy. So it basically documents that the engineers who did the audits and came together with a plan and went through a whole bunch of best practices, so a whole bunch of standards, and certifies that. So a bank can look at that retrofit plan and say, yeah, that's a good investment. That will meet our payback return. And theoretically, to your point, then you could create a marketplace where building owners can register and certify their plans, and lenders could go and find as many of them as they want to finance and pay for this. It's a long way off. At the really low-end single-family homes side, there might be other tools like local improvement charges, which are like PACE financing also less important that there's a great financial return or that the financial return's that accurate, because the margins are a little different, and frankly, as a homeowner, your benefits aren't really gonna be the energy savings. It's gonna be the thermal comfort, it's gonna be the fact that you just fixed up your home, it looks nicer, it's newer, it's got higher market value. So the accuracy and the detail of those retrofit plans for financing is less important for single-family homes than it is for really big homes.
The research that we did relative to the Energy Strong initiative, price of gas is cheap, so to do paid through savings whole home retrofits to net zero. We couldn't come up with any formula that would allow that, with the exception of the approach they used in Europe. But it took them about 7 years to get there, because the premise behind it was they took single-family net zero retrofitting and created a product. And one entity or one organization was responsible for that entire product. What that product wound up being was a factory manufactured and panelized overcladding system that included the doors and the windows, and it included a new roof and solar systems. They're now at pretty close to paid through savings, and the proposal that was out right now with the government that was to be funded by the Green on Cap and Trade funds essentially would pay for about 50% of the cost of the retrofit, with a declining contribution over a 7-year period, to the point where with sufficient aggregation, industry would adopt and create these solutions here in Canada, because we don't have them here in Canada. They have them in Europe, but they don't have them here in Canada. The market would address that. Give you an idea of what the costs look like in Canadian dollars here. To retrofit, so first of all, understand that this was all attached housing, not single family. So what you were dealing with was 2 surfaces per unit, and then end surfaces. So if I were to take that and try and apply that to one house, I would have to do all 4 walls instead of. So in that instance, the costs were coming in, looking at Toronto Community Housing Project and the Durham Region Project, between about $160,000 and $200,000 for a full retrofit that would then be guaranteed over a 20-year period. These were being done under P3 contracts with the likes of an Elliston or a PCL equivalent over a year. So one of the things that we've struggled with here is these incentive programs that provide incentives for incremental measures. And sometimes those incremental measures actually are contradictory. So if you look back at the old Eco Energy program, which funded a bunch of furnaces, that was all great, and everybody got their fuel costs reduced. But now it's time to replace the windows. So now when we put a higher efficiency window in and maybe throw a little extra insulation in, the furnace is oversized, and all the efficiency of that furnace is gone out the window. So really, if we are going to get there, we have to stop looking at these incremental measures and start looking at it from a whole building's perspective.
In the short term, the City of Toronto does offer preferred financing that can then
Could you speak a little louder?
Sure, yeah. If you're a resident of Toronto, the City of Toronto offers preferred financing that can then be applied to your land, and then the cost or the payback term would transfer if you were to sell your house onto the next owner. So there are some tools, but it doesn't quite get to the sweet spot that Larry is exploring with Energy Strong, which is the cost of the whole to get the whole way there. But there are some levers available now.
And what Jeff was talking about in the home, owners are more cognizant of the comfort elements of the retrofitting. So it's not just about saving the money. It's okay, now I can sit in front of my window, price tag on that value is a challenge.
So Larry, are you saying that for a single-family house to do the super cladding, energy sprung works would cost $100,000 per home?
I thought he said 200,000.
You said 200?
And they said that is not single family homes.
Per townhouse. So if it were a single-family home, it would be more.
Applying that particular approach. Now, that particular approach, there's economies of scale of working with big buildings, blocks of buildings rather than single family. We did a little bit of analysis around that, quickly dropped that as a.
I think it is just good to clarify that, because I hear a lot of the community, I speak to a lot of community members who've heard of this exciting project, and they want to apply it, and they haven't had this reality check that you're providing, that in the current environment, energy priced environment and so forth in Canada, it's really not within our reach as yet, unless we do some very specific programmatic development the way that you're talking.
Yeah, and that was the intent. So in Europe, they got 200,000 units, and actually the program's now rolled out all across all of Europe. The EU contributed 20 million pounds to the international rollout of it within the EU community. To bring 200,000 times 200,000 to the private sector, that'll make the private sector sit up and pay attention. That's a substantial investment.
So what, are they gonna do it for 180 on an aggregated basis? I mean, like, how much of an impact does that really make in terms of, I'm just trying to like, think about, I don't
Well,
want to
the
discourage
experience in
that,
there,
I'm just, I think people are a little bit, they haven't been provided with information to understand what the dynamics of this right now and what it takes to get to that scale.
Yeah, the experience in the Netherlands is it took about 7 years to get there, for industry to come to the table, to develop the supply chain economics. Half of the savings, and it's over 50% from today's construction costs, half of those savings came from the automation of the process to get away from stick building on a site. So now, overcladding on the tower renewal is somewhere between $15 and $25 a square foot, depending on the material that you really use to overclad. In these automated, they're down to a total system assembly cost of $14. But one company buys everything. If you look at the chemical industry, if you look at the manufacturer, charges so much to a wholesale distribution network, who then marks it up by 20% to a local distribution network, who then marks it up by 20% to a contractor, who then marks it up 20% to the end user. So 50% through automation, 50% through supply chain efficiency. And they're at 1.2 million aggregated, and they have the biggest players in Europe that are doing these retrofits.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I hope that gave you a very fulsome answer to your question. And you can even see there's dialogue amongst the panel. Like, we're all learning from each other all the time.
And all that research is available on our website. It's full reporting, all the costs.
That guy over
Next,
there.
I think the gentleman in the yellow shirt.
So Suzanne, I'm interested in your talk of refrigerant because the number one drawdown initiative is management of refrigerants, and I'm just curious as to what is being done about the HCFCs within the refrigerants and so on.
Yep, very good question, and I'm glad you asked it. I'm going to try and keep this as succinct as possible. If you want more information, I'm happy to provide it afterwards, okay? Most of our equipment, in fact all of it right at the moment, uses R410A refrigerant, which is very high in CHCs, there's no question about it. The good news is that those CHCs only come into play with the decommissioning of the system. It's a closed system. So as long as the system is in and running, it doesn't let off CFCs or anything like that, CHCs. But when it's decommissioned, so like a refrigerator, like other appliances, you need to decommission it properly and contain that refrigerant, okay? So So that's number one. And we educate and warn and give people all kinds of information about that, okay? We are looking at many other refrigerants, as are other manufacturers across the world right now, because we actually do have mandates to get rid of those CHCs and get them out of our system. The problem is, every other refrigerant, and I can go through a list of 25 acronyms, every single one of them is beyond the volatility and combustibility standards that we have for safe buildings here in Canada. None of them meet those standards. CO2 is extremely high pressure. There are many of them that there is just not another chemical that is as environmentally friendly as 410A. I mean, if you spill 410A on the ground, your dandelions will just grow bigger. It's very inert. It's not a dangerous chemical, okay? Most of the others are very explosive in some cases even, but the fire standards, they just don't meet our building codes at this point. Going forward, so the research is trying to combine those refrigerants with other compounds to get rid of them, that flammability, while at the same time reducing the CHC. So that research is going on very, very heavily, right across the whole HVAC industry. And when we talk about these refrigerants, these are in appliances that you use in your home every day. They're not just in these HVAC systems. Every chiller, every building has a certain amount of this compound in it. Mitsubishi, we have a different strategy. We're trying to get rid of the volume. If we can't reduce the CHC within the compound itself, let's reduce the compound. So we have a new system called a hybrid VRF system, whereby we've reduced the refrigerant volume within the system by about 3/4. And that system is being certified here in Canada as we speak right now. So it's in the labs being tested for CSA approval and all the other testing, okay? So we hope to have that out by the end of the year, so we're working on that very heavily. So nobody cares more about this than we do, believe me, and we will get there. But it's fine for the government to say we need to reduce it by this date, by this amount. There isn't anybody yet. It just doesn't exist within our world at this point.
I just want to follow up on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, in Montreal Protocol, I guess 70s, 19s, I forgot the date, the CFCs were banned. So,
The HCFCs were replaced the CFCs.
So, but going back to your, answer, what is big, I'm very interested to see it because we do have CHCs in Canada. What is being done once you contain it? Do you bury it? Do you burn it? How is it managed?
It's a good question. It's one I actually can't answer. I have to go back to our departments. I work at the level of design on buildings and putting these systems in. I actually am not sure of the real actual feet on the street process of decommissioning. Are you?
Right now, at this point, it's recycled.
Okay.
However, when that chemical composition through the Montreal Protocol is ruled out, because our 410s do have a life on it, they got to figure out how to deal with it at that point.
Can I make a point? I was just writing about this. The Economist just came out with an article that's in this issue that talks about it's really a three-legged stool. That refrigerants are a big problem, but there are millions, billions of air conditioners being sold all over the world now as people get richer in China and India. The first thing they want is a phone, and the second thing they want is an air conditioner.
It's also getting hotter too.
Yeah, and it's getting hotter. So, but there are three things that have to be fixed. We need better machines, the best machines out there now, cut energy consumption to 1/3 of the most machines. We need better refrigerants, and that's part of the Kigali amendment, the latest amendment to the Montreal Protocol, which unfortunately Trump is refusing to sign. And the last one is better buildings. Again, this was my big point about reducing demand, that if you cut demand dramatically by better windows, better buildings, by the strong strategy in that then you can use smaller machines, less refrigerant. You put those three things together and you can really beat the air conditioning and the refrigerant problem.
And there are passive cooling design strategies that you can employ during the design stage to, windows and the insulation are great, but you can get into ventilation and heat chimneys and things there. Passive strategies. Shade trees.
And even buildings like
Next
small one,
question,
they've
the
got
woman
rings.
way at the back.
Why is there no, why isn't there more use of geothermal?
Rings is a good one. I've worked in geothermal for the last 20 years, and it's the whole, again, it comes back to financing as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we know the science of geothermal now. At first, people kept thinking, oh, maybe it doesn't work, I'm not gonna risk it. I think we're past that now. I think it's well accepted that it is very measurable and very reliant, very resistant. So, but it comes down to money, and it's that whole, that geothermal bore field costs a chunk of change.
But
Now,
it's about 20,000 for a single family home, and I'm figuring
Yep.
with $700,000 homes in the suburbs, if it was just part of the construction, what's 50? And you can get it down with the economy of scale down to 15,000. What's an extra 15,000? And then you're paying virtually nothing to heat your home and cool your home.
the good news is we're going there. Enbridge is doing it. They have a program out right now, and they are starting to put it in. It's not in every subdivision for single-family homes, but it is going into some. There are certainly quite a few condominium buildings, office buildings, and so on. I actually work on a lot of geothermal buildings, and you might not realize quite how many of them there are out there, and how many of them specifically right now are in design. I just kind of put a list together last week, and it showed me, actually, what it showed me is that there is as much in design now as has been built in the last 10 years.
How many would it be? What percentage would it be?
Very small.
It's very small. It's probably 1% of the, it's about 1%, I think, was the number that buildings.
I think there is starting to be, to your point, Suzanne, a shift though in recognizing that there is a business model for geothermal installation at scale. So unfortunately, not yet proven out to scale down to the single family home as easily as, say, a 6-story or taller building. But what we've seen in the last 5 years is that a number of companies have established themselves as coming in, taking on the risk, and owning the energy contract because it pencils out. Larry's laughing at me, but
Yeah, the
but
industry
there's a lot more
itself.
movement in that space than there was
Yeah.
5 years ago.
But the contractors
It's just
are,
maturing.
yeah, that's right. It's again, it's the same thing. It's the, worried about the technology, not familiar with financing, sort of a bit of weird financing, but TAFTR's provided a grant to the city of Markham with their utility and Abbey Homes, and they're examining doing a whole new single-family residential development in Markham with no gas, all using a different financing and utility delivery system, all geo. So
I think
that's coming. People are exploring that very actively, so I think we are cracking that a little bit.
Definitely.
I think we have to clarify though that sometimes it's oversold. Like you said back there, that you spend the 20,000 and then you pay nothing for your cooling. That
I
is
didn't say
simply
nothing, I said little.
It's not a little, it's considerable. You've got to run all those pumps. People think geothermal is you're getting it from the earth. It's not. It's basically a refrigerator with one end of it buried in the earth. You're moving heat from one place to the other, and it takes energy to do that.
Sorry, I guess I'm just going by actual people that I know that have had it installed, and that was their assessment.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking, because it is people who actually use it that say that it's minimal.
Okay, good to know. I want to see if anybody in the audience has a question for Donald or Phil. They've been very quiet. The gentleman in the brown shirt there.
So actually, Lloyd Halfrey from the Science for Peace Community Sustainability Working Group. I also actually work with Phil at Brazilian World Institute as your executive director. And every panel member and ask them, I guess, frame it around the fact that basically it's almost 2019 now. I don't know where the Drawdown book is aiming to achieve Drawdown at, whether it's 2030 or 2050. But 2050, okay, that puts us what, 21 years? 30 years or so. What do you think would be sort of the greatest impact that we could have, and what should we do over the next 5, 10, 15 years to really create the greatest impact so we can get to that point in 20 to 30 years? Because we don't, pretty much the clock is ticking. And how do we make the big changes? What is the most impactful things that we need to do?
Great, well that sounds like, based on the
And
time available,
I'd like
a
to
great
exchange,
wrap-up question.
I'd basically like to exchange
And let's start with Donald.
contacts with everybody on this panel at some point at the end of the day. And think about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Love it. And even though my presentation was on new developments in sensitive areas, I still believe, and it was touched upon by a number of us, that in 50 years, 20 years, 30 years, most of the buildings that are going to be built at that time will already exist. And we need to focus more on retrofits and making sure that the existing buildings, communities, and neighborhoods that we have right now are drawing down that carbon, because new buildings aren't being put up fast enough. In year 2000, United Nations did a project called the Millennium Project. They look at the ecosystem that are affecting our habitat, okay? And they found out of the 24 ecosystems, 15 have been damaged. And they said, you know what, this is year 2000, okay? It's 18 years ago. So right now we're even worse, all right? So back then, their recommendation is every development must be able to regenerate the environment. This is the only way that it can help to allow the, well, be specific. They want every building that can provide some services that can unload, that withdraw from the ecosystems. Every building must be able to provide services, ecosystem services, so that the natural ecosystem can rest, can restore, can, from all the damage. Okay, so I think, you know, in order for the 2050, you know, if we don't do something on the natural ecosystem, if we cannot provide all these new or existing buildings, if we cannot provide ecosystem services, I don't think the ecosystem can survive until 2050.
Your next is
okay, all right. I would change the Canadian Building Code and cascading down the Ontario Municipal Building Code to be passive house today. Wow.
From your lips,
I
to yours.
think the most significant thing we can do would be to decouple energy supply from government policy. And 4-year planning cycles are not sufficient for anyone to make any kind of significant difference. So until we do that, we're dealing with a lack of confidence from the finance sector, from innovation, from funding mechanisms. If every 4 years all the work is going to be shut down simply because the previous government did it. I think that's
Yeah, exactly.
So, I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff together. There's a lot to do. I think from a design perspective, the solution is pretty simple, and Lloyd probably hit it best. I would speculate that there is a optimal development pattern, which is probably somewhere around 6 stories, large lot coverage, narrow streets, walkable distances, interspersed with public shared spaces, green spaces, community services. So minimize private space, keep it mid-rise or below. I think you're going to find optimal material efficiencies, optimal operating energy efficiencies, optimal transportation efficiencies. I think that that's probably the solution we need to come to, and what that's really going to require is two things. Anything development-wise that takes us in that direction, we need to get the hell out of the way and make it happen faster and cheaper. Which means, get rid of exclusionary zoning, all right? You got a single-family home, you want to protect that, get out of the way. Sorry, NIMBYs, it's not going to work. You've got to get out of the way. Conversely, you know, we got to fight harder and by specifically pricing the things that take us in the opposite direction, which is typically tall and sprawl, right? So we need price signals that align with that. That's energy price signals that are appropriate, and starting to charge properties not based on the perceived market value, but based on what they cost society and what they cost the public to service. So if we start charging single-family homes the cost of the road in front of their house, the cost of the sewers, the cost of the infrastructure to get there, you know, it's going to be a pretty rich person that can afford to live in 4,500 square feet out in the suburbs and have 3 cars. And that's appropriate. By all means, if you want to do it, do it. Just pay for it. And funnel that money towards other developments, social housing, whatever. I think that's it. Price signals, on one hand, to make it really hard to build poorly, and we've got to reduce the red tape to development that we want significantly.
No municipal candidates are going to run on that because they're not going to get elected. That's the problem. You know, how do we convince them?
So every canvasser that comes to your door between now and October, tell them that.
I feel like I have an unsatisfying answer, but I feel like I'm drawing it from what other people are saying too. You know, we're talking about, we keep trying the same things, we keep trying to, you know, we look at these technologies and we just, you know, we think about buildings and the windows and blah, blah, blah. You know, we already know what needs to be done. What we can't do is get it scaled up. And it has to do with our governance structures and how much democracy there is, and it has to do with how we perceive the benefits of these activities. And if we frame them as environmental benefits, we're going nowhere. Because we don't have, there's so many other people, the polls show us very clearly that that is not a priority for most of us in this city. We have a lot of other concerns, and unless we can genuinely consider how to address those concerns with our climate solutions, we're not going to have enough supporters, and frankly, our solutions aren't going to be as good or durable as they would be if we think more expansively about design. We're talking about, well, we need to think how can a building be regenerative? You know, how can we change the governance structures and regulatory things? There's a lot of other things to be thinking about. So I'm afraid I have to say, and this is where I've come to, and I was sharing with Jeff, that was my takeaway here, that we do have to think more expansively. It is more complicated, but it's a bit of a go slow to go fast. Unless we think in this more integrated way, I fear that we're not going to be able to lift our solutions, which we already pretty much know what they are, to scale.
We're all saying exactly the same thing. I was going to say this too. Everybody up here knows what we have to do, but we can't get it done because there's been this wave that's floated across the world. You know, the baby boomers are a huge part of the population in every country, and if you look at the States with Trump, if you look at Canada with Ford, if you look at Australia, what should happen there, and Britain with Brexit, this is a wave around the world, a reaction against that climate change. Well, Doug Ford actually said it in the news today, that climate change is a sham.
Oh my God.
And Andrew Scheer's been tweeting it as well. People would rather save 10 cents on the gas, and they would rather don't want to pay so much for electricity. And people are naturally, I guess, selfish and think about their own 10 cents on gas, then think about the bigger picture. So the issue here is political. We have to get out there in the municipal election and make sure there are progressive candidates who will build the kind of bike infrastructure that will get people out of cars and build transit. We have to start, if you have a Conservative member of Parliament, remember that we're under a parliamentary system. In Australia, they change their prime ministers in a whim every couple of years, because you can vote them out every year.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can do what happened to Patrick Brown to Doug Ford, you know, get rid of them because these policies are wrong. It doesn't have to say, oh, we're stuck with this for 4 years. The problem, unfortunately, is, oh no, I mean, I've been writing about this for years. Interest in the environment is declining every year because everybody is just realizing the issue is big, it's complex, I can't deal with it, I don't want to think about it. So you see a lot more information, less information about sustainability than you ever did. I teach it at Ryerson. You'd think it's such a big issue for designers. I'm a voluntary one-term course for third-year students. It should be baked into the education from day one, but it isn't.
Two thoughts. I'll start with the pessimistic one, and then the one thing that will change, or the series of things that will change, is true natural disaster that wakes people up. It's slowly happening to us now, and when my basement got flooded a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, oh shit, I need to invest in the waterproofing of my home, and I'm in this space all the time. I hope that that's not the shakeup that we need, but it will help. The other is really echoing many of the colleagues on the panel, is thinking about the real total societal cost. And we have to, and I think that has to scale up to the highest level of government, and the feds need to take a leadership position on changing the market. If we really think from an insurance perspective about the impact on the total economy by not acting, that's a huge leap. It's a huge cost. The feds could step up and provide an incentive to the lending community by firstly helping to back efficiency projects, provide the guarantee, help to drive and create a private market whereby lenders are able to create the scale that we need. But in order to hit that efficiently, the feds need to do a massive campaign across the country, and then the private lenders will get in, and the capitalist economy will take over, and we'll get the scale that we need. But that needs to happen fast.
But what did the feds need to do to get that ball rolling? Sorry, like that.
There are different ways, but they could be an underwriter for efficiency projects, as was one example.
Or just do a refunded carbon tax like they do.
Or the carbon, yes. Yeah. And so what that will do, if implemented and proven, leveraging investor confidence project and other tools, is it will start to wake up the private investment community, say, yeah, I have $20 million.
So just make it profitable to invest in benefits.
There you go.
Yeah. But couple regulation with financing.
Yep.
Make a match and couple them so that the financing enables, but the regulation.
I think you're right. We have to hit on all of the carrot, the stick.
I mean, think about people who smoked. You know, I grew up in the world where you couldn't even criticize the person sitting beside you who was smoking. Well, finally, it got to a federal level where they said, wait a minute here, this is costing huge dollars in our healthcare system. And they started regulating packaging, how it was sold, where it was put in the stores, you know, all kinds of things. And all of a sudden, it's taken 20, 30 years, but we woke up. And it's going to take that huge, massive national push. It's not going to come one-off, you doing your home or me doing my home. I mean, I'm going to feel great about that, and I want to do that. But it's just not going to be enough. And, you know, as others have expressed, you might do the furnace this year and then find out that it was the wrong thing because you did the windows next year. And it's got to be a much more holistic approach. And from the federal level, absolutely from the federal level.
Healthcare is one of the untapped resources that we miss. We talk about infrastructure spending. 50 cents of every provincial tax dollar goes to healthcare. So if I look at like urban planning and design, we're seeing this in the cycling community now, where it's a public safety issue. We got to start talking about driving in terms of healthcare spending, in terms of impacts on obesity and chronic disease from car-oriented communities, from vehicular accidents, issues like air pollution.
And just living in unhealthy buildings, where we spend 90% of our time.
A lot more in buildings. A ton of it.
Great. Well, I think we could continue this conversation all night long, and there must be a pub first of all, I want to thank our esteemed panelists. Thank you so much for your And of course, thank you to all of you, the audience, who gave us your time this evening to make it so that we were able to have an audience. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks to our volunteers who are here this evening, too numerous to name. Thanks to Unified Toronto and Project Drawdown, the core team, for enabling all this to happen. Thanks to the Friends House for allowing us to use this space.
Yes.
And we also have at least one announcement that we want to make.
Thank you very much. Lynn Adamson. I'm very happy to be involved in this drawdown, and I'm also involved in Climate Fast, and we do a lot of lobbying and activism on climate issues at the municipal level, but also the provincial level right now. So we have a petition around the cancelling of the cap and trade program, which is against the Environmental Bill of Rights. It's taking away money that we need. I just learned tonight it's $500 million the city is losing because that cap and trade money not coming to us. So this is a petition you're invited to sign. If you give us your email, we'll add you to our list so you can follow up. We'll have a demonstration coming in October. We're also working on a municipal campaign, so if you do put your email on there, we will add you to our Climate Fast list, and you'll know when we're doing a meeting, which is actually September 12th. So Wednesday, another Wednesday, will be our next meeting. So thank you. It's there.
Before we leave our seats, I'd like to invite Natalie back up to close.
Thank you. And I'd like also just to say that, as you may know, this is part of a 13-month plan hosted by Unified Toronto, Drawdown Toronto plan, and so this was the 4th summit out of 7. There are 3 more coming in the fall on materials, on land use, and on women and girls. And there will be an all-sector summit, date to be announced, but late February or March, that will bring all of our panelists and all of the topics together and have an extravaganza still to be planned. You are invited to be a part of it. So I believe there are forms, invitations to participate in those packages, and we would really love it if you took some time and filled those out and gave us, if you want to be in any way part of the core team that's been putting these on, if you want to be involved in putting on the next summits, giving more introductions, being part of the all-sector summit. We have built this, literally John and Satya started this a year ago, or not even a year ago, with the small team of David, Paul, me, Peter, and now we have people we didn't even know existed, like Paul and Bilal, putting on new events. It's been amazing. So we really have built it way beyond the original capacity that we had, and that's because of you. So it's a general invitation. There are, if you want to just know more about Project Drawdown in general, we have 2 introductions coming up.
Those are not the right dates, though.
September 26th, it will be here, and September 21st, date to be determined, it might be the day before, so you can find all the details on our website as they come out, unifiedtoronto.ca. And we also have a course coming up. It's the 3rd course we've run this year. It's 4 sessions, September 10th, 17th, and 24th. And then there's a hiatus and a closing week. And it's an opportunity to really get more in-depth understanding of Drawdown, of all the solutions, and to focus on one and think about how you want to bring it into being in your institution or your community or your, at a group level. So